Picture yourself walking through the bustling, sun-drenched streets of 9th century Baghdad. The air hums with a dozen different languages, a symphony of ideas echoing from the greatest library the world had ever seen. This was the Abbasid Golden Age, a breathtaking chapter in human history where the pursuit of knowledge was the highest of callings. At its heart stood the legendary House of Wisdom, a beacon that drew the finest minds from every corner of the known world. Here, scholars, translators, and inventors gathered, not as rivals but as collaborators in a grand project to understand the universe. They pored over ancient texts, debated the nature of the stars, and engineered wonders that would defy expectations for centuries. It was a time when science, philosophy, and art weren't just subjects in a book. They were the very pulse of a civilization at its peak. But what if I told you that the true depth of their genius has been largely overlooked, hidden in plain sight within the pages of history? We often think of technological leaps as a modern phenomenon, but the thinkers of the Abbasid era were grappling with concepts so advanced, so utterly puzzling, that they blur the line between historical fact and science fiction. These weren't just simple improvements, they were radical inventions that seemed to belong to a different timeline altogether. Imagine intricate mechanical devices that could mimic life, astronomical tools of staggering precision built without modern optics, and chemical processes that bordered on alchemical magic. These creations emerged from a culture that saw no conflict between rigorous experimentation and boundless imagination, where a scholar could be both a master mathematician and a designer of fantastical automatons. The results were objects and ideas that challenge our very understanding of what was possible over 1,000 years ago, hinting at a sophistication we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. This video is an invitation to step inside that world of wonder and rediscovery. We are about to embark on a journey to uncover 30 of these extraordinary inventions, each one a testament to the ingenuity of the Abbasid Golden Age. We will explore machines that could seemingly tell time and play music on their own, revolutionary medical instruments, and engineering marvels that harnessed the power of water and wind in ways that would not be seen again for generations. This is not just a list of curiosities, it is a glimpse into a mindset, a way of thinking that dared to ask what if without limits. So, join me as we unravel the secrets of these puzzling artifacts, and together we will piece together a portrait of an age where human creativity reached a zenith that still has the power to astonish us today. Our journey into this world of puzzling ingenuity begins not with a simple tool, but with a spectacle, a mechanical marvel that was as much a work of art as it was a scientific instrument. Conceived by the brilliant engineer Ismail Al-Jazari in the early 1300s, the elephant clock stands as one of the most breathtaking inventions to emerge from this era. Imagine a life-sized model of an elephant crafted from wood and brass, carrying on its back an elaborate castle. Perched atop this castle is a figure, a mahout, and coiled around the elephant's body are serpents. To a casual observer, it might look like a magnificent sculpture, but on the hour, this entire assembly would spring to life. The mahout would raise his mallet to strike a cymbal, a dragon's head would nod, and a serpent would slither down, dropping a ball into a vase with a resonant chime. This was not merely a clock, it was a mechanical theater designed to announce the passing of time in the most dramatic way possible. The true genius of Al-Jazari's creation lies hidden within its intricate hydraulic system. At the heart of the clock was a water-filled basin concealed inside the elephant's body. A complex arrangement of floats, pulleys, and levers was powered entirely by the steady drip of water. A float would gradually rise in a hidden tank until, at a precise moment, it would trigger a series of counterweights. These weights would then activate the various automata, the striking mallet, the nodding dragon, the descending serpent, in a perfectly synchronized sequence. After each performance, the mechanism would reset itself automatically, ready to begin the cycle anew. This self-regulating system, described in meticulous detail in Al-Jazari's Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, represents a pinnacle of mechanical engineering, demonstrating an understanding of siphons, valves, and automated control that was centuries ahead of its time. Beyond its technical prowess, the elephant clock served a deeper, more profound purpose as a symbol of the multicultural spirit that defined the Abbasid Golden Age. Al-Jazari intentionally designed it to be a microcosm of the known world. The elephant itself was a nod to Indian culture, while the dragons and serpents drew from Chinese and Persian mythology. The figure of the mahout evoked Egypt, and the phoenix-like bird that often crowned the castle incorporated Greek elements. This was no accident. The clock was a physical embodiment of the House of Wisdom's mission, showcasing how knowledge from diverse civilizations could be harmoniously integrated to create something entirely new and magnificent. It was a statement that the measurement of time, a universal human concern, belonged to everyone, and that progress was a collaborative, international endeavor. The significance of this invention, therefore, extends far beyond its ability to tell time. It represents a unique fusion of science, art, and philosophy. In an age before public clocks, it transformed a mundane, abstract measurement into a captivating public spectacle, making the invisible passage of time visible and awe-inspiring. It was a testament to a society that valued wonder as much as it valued precision, where an engineer like Al-Jazari was celebrated not just for his utility, but for his ability to inspire. The elephant clock challenges our modern assumptions about technology, reminding us that the most advanced creations can also be the most beautiful and culturally resonant, serving as a timeless symbol of human creativity when boundaries are dissolved and knowledge is shared freely. From the grand spectacle of the elephant clock, we turn to a more intimate yet equally revolutionary form of ingenuity. Al-Jazari's genius was not confined to public wonders. It also extended into the private chambers of royal courts, where he created what might be considered the world's first practical and programmable robots. These were his automated humanoid figures, mechanical servants designed to perform specific, repetitive tasks with a level of automation that feels eerily modern. Picture a lavish gathering in a 13th century palace. Instead of a human attendant constantly refilling cups, a life-sized figure of a servant would gracefully emerge from a hidden compartment, present a drink to a guest, and then silently retreat, only to reappear precisely when needed again. This was not magic, it was mechanical engineering of the highest order, blending artistry with functionality in a way that served both practical needs and the desire for awe-inspiring entertainment. The core of this invention's brilliance lay in its programmable control system, a concept that is fundamental to every automated machine today. At the heart of the device was a large, rotating drum studded with strategically placed pegs. Think of this drum as the robot's brain, a physical form of code. As the drum turned, driven by a water clock or a weight-driven mechanism, these pegs would engage with a series of levers and cams. Each peg's position corresponded to a specific action in the sequence. One peg might trigger a door to open, another would cause the figure to extend its arm, and yet another would initiate its retreat. By changing the arrangement of the pegs on the drum, the entire sequence of the servant's actions could be reprogrammed, making this system remarkably flexible for different tasks or timings. One of the most famous examples was the peacock fountain, a sophisticated hand-washing automaton. When a guest pulled a lever, water would begin to flow. A female servant figure would then appear from a small door offering soap. Once the guest had finished washing, the used water would drain away, triggering another part of the mechanism. This would cause a second figure, a male servant, to emerge with a towel. The entire sequence was perfectly timed and orchestrated by the peg drum, ensuring a seamless and hygienic experience that must have seemed like pure sorcery to those who witnessed it. This device wasn't just a novelty, it addressed a genuine need for cleanliness in a socially elegant and technologically advanced manner, showcasing how automation could enhance daily life. The power for these intricate performances came from a combination of hydropower and complex gear trains. Water steadily dripping into a bucket would act as a timer and a power source. Once the bucket became heavy enough, it would trip a release mechanism, setting the entire sequence in motion through a network of gears, axles, and pulleys. Counterweights ensured smooth movement, while clever use of siphons provided the automated reset function. This harmonious integration of different mechanical principles, hydraulics for timing, gears for motion transfer, and levers for actuation, demonstrates a systems thinking approach that is the hallmark of advanced engineering. Al-Jazari wasn't just building individual parts, he was designing complete, self-contained systems that operated with minimal human intervention. What makes these mechanical servants so profoundly puzzling is their intent. They were created not for industrial production or military application, but for service and ceremony. This reflects a society where technological advancement was pursued for the sake of wonder, convenience, and the elevation of human experience. In an age long before the term robot was coined, Al-Jazari had already grasped the core idea of machines taking over repetitive human tasks. His work stands as a powerful reminder that the drive for automation is not a uniquely modern obsession, but a very human desire that found one of its earliest and most eloquent expressions in the workshops of the Abbasid Golden Age. While Al-Jazari's automated servants brought wonder into the palace, his ambitions reached a scale that was truly monumental, culminating in a device that functioned as a massive, water-driven computer. This was the castle clock, an invention so complex and multifaceted that it stands as perhaps the single most impressive timekeeping device of the medieval world. Imagine a structure nearly 11 feet high, an elaborate facade resembling a castle gatehouse, but one that pulsed with mechanical life. Its face was not a simple dial with hands, it was a comprehensive astronomical display. A rotating zodiac ring showed the sun's position through the constellations, while separate mechanisms tracked the phases of the moon and the varying paths of these celestial bodies across the sky. It was, in essence, a moving model of the universe, a cosmic engine built from brass and water that brought the heavens down to earth. The clock's operation was a symphony of hydropower and mechanical precision. Its heartbeat was a water reservoir that fed a complex float chamber. Every hour, a float would rise to a specific level, triggering a release mechanism. This action would set in motion a series of cascading events powered by heavy counterweights, but the true marvel was its programming. A large revolving drum, similar to the one used in the automaton servants but on a far grander scale, was studded with pegs that acted as the clock's memory. As this drum turned over a 24-hour cycle, the pegs would engage different levers to perform a scheduled spectacle. At each hour, doors would swing open to reveal miniature figures of musicians who appeared to play their instruments, while other automated knights would circle the structure, creating a public performance that transformed the abstract passage of time into a vivid, theatrical event. What set the castle clock apart from any other timepiece of its era was its function as an analog computer. It didn't just indicate the hour, it solved astronomical problems. Because the solar day and the sidereal day, based on the fixed stars, are not the same length, a clock that accurately displays both requires a differential gearing system. Al-Jazari's design ingeniously accounted for this discrepancy. The clock had two main rings, one showing the 24 equal hours of the day, and another, the zodiac ring, which rotated at a slightly different rate to reflect the actual position of the sun against the backdrop of stars. This meant the device mechanically computed the relationship between solar time and stellar time, a calculation that required profound astronomical understanding and mechanical genius to physically replicate. This invention is a powerful testament to the Abbasid obsession with astronomy, a science they held in the highest regard for both religious timekeeping and philosophical exploration. The castle clock was more than a scientific instrument, it was a philosophical statement. By creating a machine that mirrored the perceived order and predictability of the cosmos, Al-Jazari and his patrons were expressing a belief in a rational, comprehensible universe. It embodied the idea that through careful observation and brilliant engineering, humanity could not only understand the laws governing the heavens but could also build a miniature version of them. This drive to automate the cosmos, to make its grand cycles visible and audible to all, reveals a culture deeply invested in democratizing knowledge, using public spectacle to inspire awe and curiosity about the fundamental workings of the world. But perhaps the most practical and far-reaching of Al-Jazari's contributions moved away from the spectacle of the court and into the life-giving fields and cities of the Islamic world. His work on water-raising devices addressed one of civilization's most fundamental needs, and in doing so, he engineered solutions of such elegance and efficiency that they would become the mechanical bedrock for centuries to come. Among these, two inventions stand out for their revolutionary design. First, the double-action suction pump, a machine that transformed the simple act of lifting water. Prior pumps typically worked on a single-action principle, where water was drawn in on one stroke and then pushed out on the return. Al-Jazari's design was far more advanced. It featured two separate chambers, each with its own suction valve and piston. As one piston was drawn up, it created a vacuum that pulled water into its chamber, while the other piston was simultaneously being pushed down, forcing the water from its chamber out through a discharge pipe. This created a continuous, non-pulsating flow of water, a significant leap in both power and smoothness that made irrigation and supplying water to communities vastly more effective. The second, and perhaps even more pivotal, invention was his water-raising device that utilized a crank-connecting rod system. This mechanism is something we take for granted today, as it is the very heart of an internal combustion engine, converting reciprocating or back and forth motion into rotary motion. Al-Jazari employed this principle with brilliant simplicity. His device used a water wheel turned by a flowing stream or animal power, which was connected to a rotating axle. Mounted on this axle was a crank. As the axle turned, the crank would move in a circle, pulling and pushing a connecting rod attached to it. The other end of this rod was linked to a pivoting beam which worked like a seesaw. As the crank went around, the beam would rock up and down, operating a pump at its other end. This was a monumental achievement. It was one of the earliest known uses of a crank in a machine to achieve this vital mechanical conversion, a concept that would not become widespread in Europe for another 200 years. The impact of these machines on Abbasid society cannot be overstated. In an arid region where agriculture depended on sophisticated irrigation, these devices allowed for water to be lifted from rivers and canals to higher elevation fields with unprecedented efficiency. They enabled the cultivation of larger areas of land, supporting larger populations and contributing directly to the economic and cultural flourishing of the Golden Age. Beyond agriculture, they were essential for urban water supply, helping to fill public cisterns, bathhouses, and fountains, ensuring the health and hygiene of crowded cities. This was engineering in the service of daily life, improving the conditions for millions of people in a tangible, vital way. What makes these water-raising devices so puzzling to the modern observer is their sheer prescience. The mechanical principles Al-Jazari perfected the double-action pump for continuous flow and the crank-connecting rod for motion conversion are not just historical footnotes. They are the fundamental building blocks of the Industrial Revolution. When European engineers centuries later began developing complex machinery for factories, mines, and eventually engines, they were rediscovering and refining the very concepts that Al-Jazari had documented with such clarity in his Book of Knowledge. His work serves as a powerful reminder that the timeline of technological progress is not a straight line. These foundational ideas were conceived, built, and used to great effect in the medieval Islamic world, forming a hidden bridge between the ancient world and the modern era, a testament to practical genius that quite literally helped civilization flow forward. Moving beyond the practical and the astronomical, the ingenuity of the Abbasid era extended into the very air, giving it rhythm and melody through one of history's earliest forms of programmable music. Al-Jazari, whose mind seemed to have no bounds, designed automated orchestras, intricate machines where the flow of water was translated into the flow of harmonious sound. These were not simple noisemakers, they were sophisticated hydraulic organs and percussion ensembles, capable of performing a repertoire of different melodies, all directed by a revolutionary innovation, the programmable cylinder. At the heart of these devices was a rotating drum, much like the one in his castle clock, but here its surface was studded with small, movable pins. Each pin was a note, a piece of musical code. As the cylinder turned, driven by a water wheel or a weight-driven mechanism, these pins would trip levers that opened the valves on a set of organ pipes or triggered hammers to strike drums, bells, or cymbals. By carefully arranging the pattern of pins on the cylinder, a technician could literally program the machine to play an entirely different tune, a concept of stored musical memory that wouldn't become common in the West until the invention of the music box centuries later. The mechanism's operation was a masterpiece of interdisciplinary engineering. For the hydraulic organ, water power served a dual purpose. The steady flow turned the main water wheel, which provided the rotational force for the programmable cylinder. Simultaneously, water pressure was used to supply a constant stream of air to the organ's pipes. The pins on the rotating cylinder were the conductors of this mechanical orchestra. As a pin passed a specific point, it would engage a lever. This lever, in turn, would open a valve connected to a particular pipe, allowing the pressurized air to flow through it and produce a specific musical note. The duration of the note was determined by the length of the pin. A longer pin would hold the valve open for a greater duration, sustaining the note. For percussion instruments, the principle was similar, with pins activating levers that swung hammers. This system allowed for a surprising degree of musical expression, controlling not just the sequence of notes but also their rhythm and emphasis, creating a performance that was complex and captivating. Within the context of the royal court, these musical automata were far more than mere novelties. They were powerful symbols of status, sophistication, and control over the natural world. Imagine a lavish banquet where guests are entertained not by human musicians who might tire or make errors, but by an invisible, flawless mechanical ensemble. The music would emanate from an elaborate clockwork-like structure, a visible testament to the patron's wealth and his ability to harness the greatest minds of the age. This automated entertainment created an atmosphere of pure wonder, blurring the line between art and engineering. It projected an image of a court so advanced that even its leisure activities were powered by the pinnacle of technological achievement. The ability to change the program, to have the machine play a solemn tune for one occasion and a lively dance for another, added a layer of customizable luxury that reinforced the ruler's command over his environment. The profound implication of this invention lies in its abstract concept of programming. Al-Jazari had decoupled the machine's physical action from its intended function through a reusable, changeable template. The pins on the cylinder were a form of software, a set of instructions that could be altered without having to rebuild the entire intricate hardware of levers, pipes, and hammers. This separation of program from mechanism is a foundational principle of modern computing. While his machine was creating music rather than calculating numbers, the underlying logic was strikingly similar, a stored program controlling a complex automated process. It reveals a way of thinking that saw machines not as single-purpose tools, but as flexible platforms capable of a variety of outcomes based on human instruction. This leap in thought from building a device that does one thing to building a device that can be told what to do marks a pivotal moment in the history of technology, one that emerged from a culture that celebrated the fusion of artistic creativity with mechanical precision. Now, let us shift our focus from the mechanical wonders of the court to the bustling marketplace, where a different kind of ingenuity was safeguarding the very lifeblood of commerce. In the sprawling trade networks of the Abbasid Caliphate, which stretched from the Mediterranean to India, merchants faced a constant and familiar problem: how to transport large sums of money without carrying heavy, dangerous chests of coins. The solution was the sack, a revolutionary financial instrument that functioned as a direct precursor to the modern cheque. A merchant in Baghdad could deposit his gold dinars with a trusted banker or saraf and receive a written note in return. He could then travel to Damascus or Cairo, present this note to a corresponding banker, and receive the equivalent value in local currency. It was a system that enabled unprecedented economic fluidity, but it also created a new vulnerability: fraud. A stolen or forged sack could ruin a merchant. The Abbasid response to this threat was not just practical, it was brilliantly cryptographic. The true security genius of the sack lay not in its existence, but in the cryptic language used to denote the monetary amount. Instead of writing a clear number like 100 dinars, the banker would inscribe a riddle, a poetic phrase, or a coded reference that only the intended recipient and the issuing banker could understand. This was a form of steganography, hiding a secret message in plain sight within an apparently innocuous text. For example, a check might carry a line of poetry that, to anyone else, seemed like a simple blessing or a fragment of verse. But for the merchant it was addressed to, that specific line was a pre-arranged key. The mention of a full moon might signify 50 dinars, while a reference to 10 brave knights could mean 1,000. The codes could be incredibly personal, drawing on shared knowledge, inside jokes, or even family history, creating a lock for which only the rightful owner possessed the key. This system required a remarkable level of shared intellectual capital between bankers and their clients. It presumed a culture where literacy, poetry, and intellectual games were commonplace among the merchant class. The codes weren't random. They were often based on well-known literary works, historical events, or astronomical phenomena, requiring the recipient to have the cultural literacy to decipher the allusion. This transformed a simple financial transaction into a test of wits and trust. A banker receiving a sack would first scrutinize the handwriting and seal for authenticity, but the final verification came from watching the recipient's face as they read the coded amount. If they nodded in recognition and confirmed the sum without hesitation, the transaction was secure. If they looked confused, it was a clear signal of forgery or theft. The implications of this practice are profound. It represents one of the earliest and most sophisticated applications of cryptography for economic security, predating the complex ciphers of European states by centuries. It showcases a society that understood the concept of authentication through shared secrets long before the digital age. Furthermore, the cryptographic check highlights the advanced nature of the Abbasid economy. This was not a barter system. It was a sophisticated financial network with credit instruments, trusted intermediaries, and a deep-seated concern for risk management. The sack wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a testament to a commercial world that valued intellectual agility as much as it valued gold, using the power of language and code to build a secure and flourishing economic empire that connected continents. Now, let's consider a different kind of power, one that was harnessed not from water or intricate gears, but from the very breath of the sky. While Europe would not see its first windmills for several more centuries, the vast, windswept plains of eastern Persia, in a region known as Sistan, were already alive with their rhythmic turning. Here, in the 9th century, Abbasid engineers perfected the earliest documented windmills, a revolutionary solution to one of the most pressing challenges of arid land agriculture. Sistan was famously called the Land of the Wind, a place where relentless, powerful gusts swept across the landscape. Rather than seeing this as a hardship, the ingenious minds of the era saw it as an untapped resource, a boundless engine that could be put to work. Their creation was the vertical axis Painmoan windmill, a design of such clever simplicity that it transformed the economic landscape of the region. The design of these ancient windmills was strikingly different from the familiar horizontal axis windmills that later dotted the European countryside. Imagine a large, cylindrical tower of stone or clay bricks standing several meters high. Instead of having sails radiating from a central horizontal shaft, the Abbasid windmill had a vertical central drive shaft. Around this shaft, 6 to 12 rectangular sails made of reeds or cloth were mounted vertically. These sails were positioned to catch the wind no matter which direction it was blowing from, a crucial advantage in the variable winds of Sistan. The entire structure was often surrounded by a wall with directional vents that helped funnel and channel the wind toward the sails, increasing its efficiency. As the wind pushed against the sails, it caused the entire vertical shaft to rotate, transferring that rotational energy directly to the millstones inside the tower through a simple yet effective gear system. The primary application of this technology was grinding grain, an arduous and time-consuming task traditionally done by hand or with animal power. The windmill automated this process on an industrial scale. The rotating central shaft would connect to a large, stationary upper millstone called the runner, which turned against a stationary lower stone, the bedstone. Grain poured between these stones would be ground into flour continuously for as long as the wind blew. This was a monumental leap in productivity. A single windmill could grind far more grain than any team of animals or laborers, providing a reliable and cost-effective way to produce food for growing urban populations. Furthermore, these windmills were adapted to power water-raising devices, using the same rotational force to operate chains of pots or suction pumps that lifted water from underground aquifers to irrigate fields, making the desert bloom. The impact on a region like Sistan was nothing short of transformative. By harnessing a free and abundant natural force, these windmills liberated human and animal labor for other tasks, boosting the local economy and enabling sustainable agriculture in a challenging environment. They became the engines of entire communities, with their distinctive silhouettes defining the skyline. This invention demonstrates a profound understanding of aerodynamic principles and mechanical adaptation. The Abbasid engineers didn't just build a machine, they built an ecosystem of technology perfectly suited to its environment. It stands as a powerful example of sustainable engineering from the medieval period, a testament to the ability to work with nature rather than against it to solve fundamental human needs. From the steady, reliable power of the windmill, we now turn to a story of pure, breathtaking ambition, a tale that leaps from the solid ground of engineering into the open sky itself. Centuries before the famous sketches of Leonardo da Vinci and a full millennium before the Wright brothers, a man in the vibrant city of Cordoba dared to believe that human flight was possible. His name was Abbas ibn Firnas, and his life stands as a testament to the boundless curiosity that defined the Islamic Golden Age. A true polymath, he was an inventor, an engineer, a physician, a poet, and a musician. But it is for one audacious act that he is most remembered, his attempt to fly. This wasn't a mere legend or a fanciful thought experiment. It was a meticulously planned public demonstration based on careful observation and a rudimentary understanding of the principles that would one day become aerodynamics. The event took place sometime around the year 875, when Ibn Firnas was already an elderly man. He had constructed a winged apparatus, a glider made from a wooden frame covered with silk. Historical accounts describe how he reinforced the silk with wooden struts and even adorned the wings with actual bird feathers, believing they might capture the essence of flight. He didn't simply jump from a tower, he chose a hill overlooking Cordoba. gathering a crowd of onlookers to witness this momentous experiment. After reportedly speaking about his inspiration drawn from the flight of birds, he climbed to his launch point, fastened the wings to his arms and body, and took a running leap into the air. To the astonishment of the crowd, his creation worked. He did not plummet to the earth but soared, gliding for a considerable distance. Some accounts suggest as long as 10 minutes maneuvering through the air before his eventual descent. This flight, however, was only a partial success. The landing was rough. Ibn Firnas crashed, injuring his back. Later analysis, which he himself reportedly conducted, pinpointed the critical flaw in his design. He had forgotten the tail. He had successfully mimicked the wings of a bird, but had failed to account for the crucial role a bird's tail plays in stabilizing its flight and controlling its landing. Without a tail surface to provide stability and pitch control, his glider would have been incredibly difficult to manage, leading to an uncontrolled crash landing. Despite the injury, the attempt was far from a failure. It provided invaluable first-hand data. Ibn Firnas's own reflections on the crash, his understanding that a flying machine needed a way to slow its descent and stabilize itself, represent one of the earliest recorded insights into the practical challenges of aviation. His contributions to the science of flight extended beyond this single dramatic event. In his workshop, he was said to have constructed a special room where he could study the atmosphere and the stars, even creating a primitive planetarium with mechanical models that simulated celestial movements. More directly related to flight, he experimented with the properties of materials and the flow of air, laying conceptual groundwork that others would later build upon. While his glider was not a powered aircraft, his successful glide proved a fundamental principle that a heavier-than-air craft could generate lift and stay aloft. He demonstrated that the sky was not an impossible realm, but a frontier that could be approached through reason, observation, and courage. Abbas ibn Firnas's place in aviation history is therefore foundational, though often overlooked in Western narratives. He represents the crucial first step beyond myth, like the story of Icarus, and into the realm of empirical testing. He was not a mythological figure with wings of wax and feathers. He was a scientist who built a machine based on his observations and was willing to risk his life to test his hypothesis. His story is a powerful symbol of the Abbasid spirit, a relentless drive to push beyond accepted limits, to explore every facet of the natural world, and to transform visionary ideas into tangible, if imperfect, reality. His flight, though ending in a crash, was a landmark moment of human aspiration, a brief but brilliant soar into a future that would take 1,000 years to fully arrive. Yet, while Abbas ibn Firnas looked to the sky to understand its vastness, another brilliant mind of the era turned his gaze in the opposite direction, into the very nature of light itself. This brings us to Ibn al-Haytham, known in the West as Al-Hazan, a scholar whose revolutionary work in the 11th century would fundamentally change our understanding of vision and lay the essential groundwork for a device that would one day capture moments in time. Before Al-Haytham, two competing theories dominated the discussion of how we see. One, dating back to Euclid and Ptolemy, suggested that the eye emitted a kind of visual ray that traveled outward to touch objects, illuminating them for our perception. The other, supported by Aristotle, proposed that an object's form was transmitted through the air to the eye. Al-Haytham, through meticulous experimentation, rejected both. He proposed a radical new idea, that vision occurs because light rays, originating from a source like the sun and reflecting off objects, travel in perfectly straight lines into the eye. We do not send out rays, we receive them. To prove his theory, Al-Haytham needed a controlled environment, a laboratory where he could isolate and observe the behavior of light. His solution was the camera obscura, which translates from Latin as dark chamber. His version was not a portable box, but often a completely darkened room with a single, tiny hole, no larger than the tip of a needle, punched in a window shutter. When bright sunlight streamed through this minuscule aperture, a miraculous thing happened on the opposite wall. An image of the world outside trees, people, buildings would appear, perfectly rendered in full color but upside down and reversed left to right. This phenomenon had been noted by ancient Chinese and Greek philosophers, but they had treated it as a curious novelty. Al-Haytham was the first to systematically investigate it, to ask not just what was happening but precisely why. His experiments inside this dark chamber were a masterpiece of scientific method. He demonstrated that the image was formed because light travels in straight lines. Light from the top of an object outside, like a tree branch, passed through the pinhole and continued in a straight line to strike the bottom of the wall inside the room. Conversely, light from the bottom of the object traveled straight to the top of the wall, resulting in the inverted image. By moving the pinhole or using multiple apertures, he could create multiple images, proving that each point of light on the outside corresponded to a single point on the inside. He also observed that the smaller and more precise the pinhole, the sharper and clearer the projected image became, because it limited the overlap of these distinct light beams, a principle that remains crucial in optics to this day. The implications of this work were staggering. Al-Haytham had not only correctly explained vision, he had also created the world's first functional, lensless camera. More importantly, he established a new standard for scientific inquiry itself. In his seminal work, The Book of Optics, he argued that knowledge must be based not on the authority of past scholars, but on testable hypotheses, repeatable experiments, and empirical evidence. He insisted that the researcher must doubt everything and trust only what could be demonstrated through observation and mathematical proof. This approach, which we now recognize as the cornerstone of the modern scientific method, was a radical departure from the past and a direct product of the inquisitive, evidence-based culture fostered during the Abbasid Golden Age. Ibn al-Haytham's legacy, therefore, is twofold. His camera obscura was not merely a fascinating invention, it was a powerful tool for discovery that would inspire scientists and artists for centuries. Later thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci and Johannes Kepler would use his principles to study light and perspective, and the device would eventually evolve into the photographic camera. But perhaps his greater contribution was methodological. By grounding his theories in rigorous experiment, he shifted the course of science from speculation to demonstration. He showed that the natural world operates by consistent, observable laws, and that by creating the right conditions, like a simple dark room with a tiny hole, humanity could unlock those secrets, one beam of light at a time. But while scholars like Ibn al-Haytham were unlocking the secrets of the external world, another critical field of inquiry was turning inward, focusing on the complex chemistry of the human body itself. This brings us to a quieter, yet equally revolutionary kind of invention, one that wasn't a physical machine, but a systematic framework that would save countless lives. Before the 9th century, the practice of medicine, particularly the preparation of remedies, was often a haphazard affair, steeped in folklore, superstition, and guesswork. A physician might rely on a single, often toxic, ingredient or combine various substances with little understanding of their interactions or precise dosages. The results were unpredictable at best and fatal at worst. It was into this landscape that a scholar named Abu Yusuf Yaqub ibn Ishaq al-Kindi introduced a powerful new concept, the idea that pharmacy could be a precise, quantitative science. His greatest contribution was the Acrobatin, a book whose title translates to medical formulary and which effectively became the world's first known official pharmacopoeia. Al-Kindi was a quintessential polymath of the Golden Age, making significant contributions to philosophy, mathematics, cryptography, and music theory. But it was his methodical approach to medicine that had the most immediate and profound impact on public health. He argued passionately that the effectiveness of a drug was not a matter of magic or chance, but a direct consequence of its measurable properties and the precise quantity administered. The acrobat hin was the practical embodiment of this philosophy. It was not a mere list of herbs, it was a comprehensive manual that detailed the preparation of hundreds of complex compound medicines. These recipes brought together ingredients from plant, animal, and mineral sources, but they did so with a rigorous methodology that was entirely new. Each entry specified exact weights and measures, detailed the proper method of preparation, whether through grinding, distillation, or infusion, and provided clear instructions for dosage based on the patient's age, strength, and specific ailment. Consider the practical difference this made. Instead of a healer vaguely instructing a patient to take a pinch of a certain root, Al-Kindi's formulary would prescribe a precise weight, perhaps using the standard grain of barley as a unit of measurement. It provided recipes for syrups, ointments, pills, and electuaries medicines that combined multiple active ingredients to enhance their effect or counterbalance side effects. For instance, a recipe might combine a pain-relieving ingredient like opium with a digestive aid to counteract its constipating effects, demonstrating an early understanding of polypharmacy and the importance of managing a treatment's secondary consequences. This shift from single-ingredient remedies to sophisticated, balanced compounds was a monumental leap, transforming the apothecary's workshop from a place of mystical concoction into a laboratory of scientific precision. The intellectual foundation of Al-Kindi's system was deeply rooted in the ancient Greek theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, which proposed that health was a state of balance between these bodily fluids. But Al-Kindi took this theory and systematized it with mathematical rigor. He developed a quantitative scale to classify drugs based on their degree of heat, cold, dryness, and moistness, the primary qualities believed to affect the humors. A fever, seen as an excess of heat, would be treated with a medicine possessing a high degree of coldness. The revolutionary aspect was that Al-Kindi assigned numerical values to these qualities, attempting to create a mathematical logic for dosage. This wasn't just qualitative advice, it was an early effort to apply mathematics to therapeutics, to make the art of healing a predictable and calculable science. The impact of the acrobatin extended far beyond the pages of a book. It established pharmacy as a respected and independent profession, distinct from that of the general physician. It provided a standardized reference that could be used across the vast Abbasid Empire, ensuring a consistent quality of care from Baghdad to Cordoba. Apothecaries could now be trained according to a common set of principles, and their remedies could be reliably reproduced. This was a crucial step in combating fraud and ensuring patient safety. By moving medicine away from the realm of superstition and into the light of systematic inquiry, Al-Kindi laid the groundwork for clinical pharmacology. His work inspired later Islamic physicians like Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, who expanded upon his formulary, and his ideas eventually made their way to Europe, influencing the development of pharmacy there for centuries. The acrobatin was an invention of the mind, a testament to the power of systemization, proving that one of the most profound advancements in technology can be a new way of thinking, a framework that brings order, safety, and hope to the fundamental human endeavor of healing. Returning to the world of Al-Jazari, we find an invention that perfectly encapsulates his genius for merging the absolutely practical with the utterly theatrical. Earlier we discussed his programmable servants, but the so-called peacock fountain stands apart as a more complete and integrated system, a device that many historians now point to as a strong candidate for the title of the first robot in a functional sense. This was not a mere clockwork spectacle for a royal audience. It was an automated hand-washing station designed for personal use, a machine that interacted directly with a human user to perform a service from start to finish. Its purpose was mundane hygiene, but its execution was nothing short of magical, creating an experience that blurred the line between using a tool and being served by an intelligent entity. The sequence of operation was a masterpiece of timed automation. Imagine approaching this ornate fountain, likely placed in a courtyard or palace anteroom. Instead of a simple spigot, you would see a beautifully crafted peacock, its tail fanned out. The process began when the user pulled a lever. This single action initiated a chain reaction powered by hydropower. Water would immediately begin to flow from a spout, allowing the user to wash their hands. But that was only the beginning of the performance. As the water ran, the entire peacock figure would gracefully rotate, a delightful visual distraction. Once the user finished washing and released the lever, the water flow would stop, but the machine's work was not done. The used water draining away would itself act as a trigger, its weight or flow tripping the next stage of the mechanism. This is where the automation truly earned its robotic credentials. The draining water would activate a second, hidden mechanism. A small door would open and a humanoid servant figure, meticulously crafted, would emerge. This automaton would extend its arms, offering a fresh towel to the user. After a predetermined amount of time, allowing the user to take the towel and dry their hands, the servant figure would retract back into its hidden compartment and the door would close. The entire system would then reset, ready for the next person. This complete feedback loop user action initiates a process. The machine responds with water and a visual show. The user's completion of the task, stopping the water, triggers a second automated response, the towel offer, and the machine then resets, is a fundamental principle of robotics. The machine perceived a change in its environment, the lever pull, the water drain, and executed a pre-programmed series of useful actions. What makes the peacock fountain so puzzling and significant is this seamless integration of function and spectacle. The rotating peacock served no practical cleaning purpose. It was pure theater, designed to inspire wonder and signify the sophistication of the household. Yet, it was an integral part of the mechanical sequence. The automation of the towel service, however, was intensely practical. It eliminated the need for a human attendant to stand by constantly, ensuring hygiene and convenience. Al-Jazari didn't see these two aspects as separate. For him, the wonder was part of the function. A beautifully engineered solution to an everyday problem was inherently spectacular. This challenges our modern, sterile view of robots as purely functional entities. In the Abbasid court, a robot could be, and perhaps should be, a work of art, its value measured not just in labor saved but in the awe it inspired. This invention forces us to reconsider the very definition of a robot. If a robot is a machine capable of carrying out a complex series of actions automatically, especially one programmable by a computer, then Al-Jazari's peg drum system was the computer and the servant figure was the end effector. The peacock fountain wasn't just a fancy faucet, it was a system that sensed, processed, and acted. It responded to its user, performed a multi-step task, and restored itself to a ready state. In this intricate dance of levers, water, and gears, we see the dim origins of the automated world we live in today, a testament to a time when the most advanced technology was designed not just to serve the body, but to delight the spirit. While the mechanical wonders of Al-Jazari captured the imagination of the court, a different kind of precision was being perfected in the operating theaters of Cordoba, one that would save countless lives and redefine the very nature of medicine. This revolution was led by a man named Al-Jazari, known in the West as Abul Qasis, whose monumental 30-volume encyclopedia, the Al-Tasrif, became the definitive medical text for over 500 years. The final volume of this masterpiece was devoted entirely to surgery, a field that had been largely neglected and even scorned by many of his predecessors. Al-Jazari's work single-handedly elevated surgery from a menial craft practiced by barbers to a respected branch of scientific medicine, and at the heart of this transformation was his astonishing collection of over 200 surgical instruments, many of which he designed himself. For the first time in history, a surgeon had a comprehensive, illustrated guide to the tools of his trade, complete with precise descriptions of their use. The sheer variety and specialization of these instruments was unprecedented. Al-Jazari didn't just describe a simple knife, he illustrated and explained a vast array of scalpels, each with a blade shape and angle meticulously designed for a specific procedure. One of his most significant contributions was the invention of the syringe. He created devices for injecting fluids into the urethra and for extracting cataracts from the eye, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of pressure and suction. His detailed illustrations of forceps for extracting foreign objects, arrowheads, and even teeth were revolutionary, providing a safe and controlled method for removals that had previously been brutal and haphazard. He designed specialized bone saws with ergonomic handles and protected blades to allow for precise amputations while minimizing damage to surrounding tissue. And his lithotomy scalpel for removing bladder stones was engineered to make a clean incision with minimal risk to the patient. What truly set Al-Jazari apart was his methodical approach to the design process. He emphasized that a tool must be perfectly suited to its task, considering factors like the material it was made from, its weight, balance, and the comfort of the surgeon wielding it. He advocated for instruments crafted from the finest materials, often preferring iron and steel for their sharpness and durability, and he even described the proper methods for cleaning and storing them to prevent rust and infection. This attention to detail extended to the surgical environment itself. He invented a concealed knife for use in front of anxious patients, understanding the psychological impact of the procedure, and he designed a catheter that could be heated to cauterize wounds internally, showcasing an innovative approach to controlling bleeding. Each instrument was not just a tool, but a carefully considered solution to a specific medical challenge. The impact of these inventions on surgical practice was immediate and profound. By providing clear, standardized illustrations, Al-Jazari eliminated the guesswork and inconsistency that had plagued earlier surgeons. A physician in Cairo could now use the same precise tool for a cataract operation as a colleague in Baghdad, leading to more predictable and successful outcomes. His work established fundamental principles of surgery that are still relevant today, such as the importance of controlling hemorrhage with ligatures, the use of antiseptic techniques with alcohol and hot irons for cauterization, and the necessity of thorough anatomical knowledge before attempting any procedure. The Al-Tasrif became the cornerstone of medical education in both the Islamic world and later in Europe after it was translated into Latin. For centuries, surgeons from Rogerius in the 12th century to Ambroise Paré in the 16th cited Al-Jazari as their primary authority, and his illustrations were faithfully copied in medical texts for generations. His legacy is not merely a collection of ingenious devices, but the establishment of surgery as a disciplined, systematic science, founded on the principle that the right tool, wielded with knowledge and skill, can mean the difference between life and death. But the march of innovation was not confined to the operating room or the palace courtyard. It also surged ahead within the smoky, alchemical workshops where the very nature of matter was being probed. Here, we encounter an invention that is less a singular object and more a revolutionary process, one that would fundamentally alter the course of science, medicine, and industry, the sophisticated distillation apparatus perfected by Muslim chemists. At the forefront of this chemical revolution was Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in Europe as Geber, an 8th-century scholar whose work bridged the mystical world of alchemy and the rigorous foundations of practical chemistry. While alchemists before him had sought to transform base metals into gold, Jabir's true legacy was his systematic, experimental approach to chemical processes, and his most enduring contribution was the refinement of the alembic, a device that gave humanity unprecedented control over the separation and purification of substances. The core of this breakthrough was a deceptively simple yet brilliantly effective two-part system. The first component was the cucurbit, a large, rounded flask or pot where the liquid mixture to be distilled was heated. The second and most crucial part was the alembic itself, a cap or head that fit snugly onto the cucurbit, featuring a long, downward-sloping tube known as the beak or snout. The principle was elegant. As the liquid in the cucurbit was heated, the more volatile components would vaporize first. These hot vapors would rise into the cooler dome of the alembic. There, they would condense back into liquid form, trickling down the inner surface and flowing out through the beak into a separate receiving flask. This process allowed for the precise separation of liquids based on their different boiling points, a concept that is absolutely fundamental to every chemical and petroleum refinery in the world today. Jabir and his successors didn't just use this device, they perfected it, crafting alembics from glass and ceramic to allow for observation and to resist corrosion from the powerful acids they were creating. The practical applications of this technology were staggering in their diversity and importance. One of the most significant was the production of pure, distilled alcohol. By fermenting sugary or starchy substances and then distilling the resulting liquid, chemists could isolate ethanol, which they called alcohol, originally referring to a fine powder for the eyes but later applied to the distilled spirit. This discovery was monumental. In medicine, alcohol became a vital solvent for creating more potent and shelf-stable herbal tinctures and medicines. It also served as a powerful antiseptic for cleaning wounds, a use that would not become widespread in the West for centuries. Beyond healing, the distillation process unlocked the world of high-potency perfumery, allowing for the extraction of the essential oils from roses, jasmine, and musk with a purity and intensity that was previously impossible, creating an entire industry of luxury goods. Perhaps even more revolutionary was the ability to distill and concentrate powerful mineral acids. Using the alembic, chemists learned to produce nitric acid by distilling a mixture of saltpeter, vitriol, and alum. They created sulfuric acid by distilling green vitriol and hydrochloric acid from salt and vitriol. The isolation of these corrosive substances was a turning point in chemical history. For the first time, chemists had reagents powerful enough to dissolve metals and break down materials that had previously been impervious. This opened up entirely new avenues for experimentation, from testing the composition of minerals to developing new dyes and metalworking techniques. The ability to create such potent acids moved chemistry out of the realm of simple transformations and into the age of analytical and industrial chemistry, providing the essential tools for countless future discoveries. What makes the distillation apparatus a truly puzzling invention from this era is the sheer breadth of its impact. It was not a device with a single purpose. It was a platform technology that enabled progress across multiple fields simultaneously. In the pharmacy, it produced life-saving medicines and antiseptics. In the workshop, it created the acids that would drive industrial processes. In the home, it produced the perfumes and rosewaters that defined Abbasid luxury. This one tool, refined by the methodical work of Jabir ibn Hayyan and his followers, demonstrates a culture that valued both pure knowledge and its practical application. They saw no divide between the quest to understand the fundamental principles of matter and the drive to create tangible products that improved health, economy, and daily life. The humble alembic, with its graceful, condensing dome, thus stands as a silent engine of the Golden Age, a device that quite literally purified and concentrated the innovative spirit of the era, drop by precious drop. While the alembic allowed chemists to probe the substance of the earth, another instrument was enabling explorers to conquer the vastness of the oceans, guided by the immutable lights of the heavens. The story of the navigational quadrant is one of gradual refinement, a tool that ancient astronomers had used on solid ground but which reached its true potential in the hands of Abbasid scholars, who transformed it into a reliable guide for sailors venturing beyond the sight of land. Before its widespread adoption, navigation in the open sea was a perilous art. heavily reliant on dead reckoning, the observation of coastal landmarks, and the oral traditions passed down through generations of sailors. To sail into the deep, trackless ocean was to gamble with one's life. The quadrant offered a way to fix one's position with scientific certainty, turning the starry sky into a universal map. The principle behind the quadrant was beautifully simple, yet its application required immense skill. The instrument itself was typically a quarter circle of wood or brass, with a scale of 90 degrees marked along its curved edge. From the apex hung a weighted plumb line. To use it, a navigator would sight along the top edge of the quadrant towards a specific celestial body, most commonly the pole star, which remains almost fixed directly above the North Pole. The plumb line, pulled straight down by gravity, would then cross the degree scale. The angle read from the scale was the star's altitude or its height above the horizon. Since the altitude of the pole star changes predictably as one travels north or south, this single measurement could reveal the observer's latitude. A sailor in Alexandria would measure one angle, while a sailor in the Indian Ocean would measure another. By comparing these readings to known values recorded in navigational tables, a ship's captain could know exactly how far north or south they were, a revolutionary piece of information. The true genius of Abbasid astronomers like Habash al-Hazib and al-Batani was not in inventing the quadrant but in perfecting it. They introduced critical refinements that enhanced its accuracy and usability. One major improvement was the addition of sighting vanes, small plates with pinholes mounted on the straight edge of the quadrant. These allowed for a much more precise alignment with the celestial target than simply sighting along the wood. Furthermore, they developed larger, more stable versions that could be mounted on a stand, reducing the errors introduced by a sailor's unsteady hand on the deck of a rolling ship. Most importantly, they created sophisticated mathematical tables known as zodiacs, which provided the calculated altitudes of the sun and key stars for different latitudes and times of the year. A navigator no longer had to be a master mathematician. They could take a measurement and then simply consult the tables to find their position. This technological leap had a profound and immediate impact on trade. With the ability to determine latitude reliably, the maritime routes of the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean became far safer and more efficient. Ships could now sail directly across open water, a practice known as latitude sailing, rather than tediously following the coastline. A merchant vessel from Basra could strike out into the Arabian Sea, confident that by tracking the altitude of the sun or stars, it could reliably find the latitude of its destination, say the port of Zanzibar, and then simply sail east or west along that parallel until land was sighted. This dramatically shortened journey times reduced the risks of piracy and shipwreck near treacherous coasts, and opened up new, more direct trade links between the Islamic world, India, East Africa, and even China. Beyond its nautical function, the quadrant was a versatile scientific instrument that served the deeply spiritual and social needs of the time. In cities across the empire, astronomers used larger, more precise quadrants mounted in observatories to track the sun's path with incredible accuracy. This data was essential for solving one of the most pressing daily questions for a Muslim society: the precise times for the 5 daily prayers. These prayers are defined by the sun's position, such as when an object's shadow equals its length for the Asr prayer. By using the quadrant to measure the sun's altitude, scholars could calculate these times with a degree of precision previously unimaginable, publishing prayer timetables for mosques and ensuring religious observance was synchronized across the community. Thus, the same instrument that guided sailors across trackless oceans also helped structure the daily rhythm of life for millions, a perfect symbol of the Abbasid Golden Age's commitment to uniting scientific discovery with the practical and spiritual dimensions of human existence. After charting the stars and navigating the seas with precise instruments, the intellectual energy of the Abbasid Golden Age required a permanent home, a place where the sparks of individual genius could be gathered into a sustained flame. This gave rise to what may be the most enduring and influential invention of the era, the very concept of the university as a formal, state-sponsored institution dedicated to higher learning. This was not a single device you could hold in your hand, but a social and educational technology of immense power, a system designed to produce knowledge systematically rather than rely on chance discoveries. While the legendary House of Wisdom in Baghdad functioned as an unparalleled research center and library, attracting the greatest minds for translation and collaboration, it was the proliferation of the madrasa and the integration of the Bimaristan, or hospital, that created the complete model for advanced education that would eventually shape the modern world. The classic madrasa was far more than a simple religious school for memorizing scripture. It was a purpose-built college, often established through a charitable endowment known as a waqf, which provided a permanent source of funding for the building, the teachers, and even stipends for students. This financial independence was revolutionary. It freed scholars from relying on the fleeting patronage of a caliph or noble, allowing for long-term, stable academic pursuits. At its core was a standardized curriculum that began with the foundational sciences of Arabic grammar and logic, then progressed to more advanced subjects like mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and of course, law and theology. What made this system truly unique was its method of instruction. Learning was not passive. It was built around the halakha, or study circle, where students would gather around a master scholar for lectures, debates, and intense discussion. This Socratic method emphasized critical thinking and deep understanding over rote memorization, fostering an environment where challenging established ideas was not just allowed but encouraged as a path to truth. Parallel to the rise of the madrasa, and often physically connected to it, was the Bimaristan. These were not mere places for the sick to rest. They were the world's first true teaching hospitals, the direct ancestors of our modern medical schools. The most famous, like the Al-Jazari Hospital in 10th century Baghdad, were vast complexes with separate wards for different diseases, libraries, pharmacies, and even facilities for the insane, treating patients with a compassion that was unheard of elsewhere. Here, theoretical knowledge from the madrasa met practical application. Senior physicians would make their rounds accompanied by students, diagnosing illnesses, discussing symptoms, and observing treatments. Students learned by doing, under strict supervision, how to set bones, perform surgeries with the instruments Al-Jazari described, and diagnose ailments based on the latest medical texts. This clinical training model, combining rigorous book learning with hands-on experience, was a quantum leap in medical education, producing generations of highly skilled, empirically trained doctors. The synergy between these institutions created an ecosystem of innovation. A student could study mathematics in the madrasa, then walk across the courtyard to the Bimaristan's library to consult a text on optics by Ibn al-Haytham to better understand an eye disease. An astronomer's calculations from the observatory could be used by a geographer teaching in the same complex to refine their maps. This cross-pollination of ideas was institutionalized. Perhaps the greatest example of this model in action is Al-Azhar in Cairo, founded in 970 CE. While it began as a center for Ismaili scholarship, it quickly evolved into a premier university, offering a broad curriculum and attracting students from across Africa, Asia, and Europe. Its continuous operation for over 1,000 years stands as a powerful testament to the durability of the system it helped pioneer. The legacy of this institutional invention is immense. When European scholars began to visit the Islamic world during the Crusades and through cultural contact in Spain and Sicily, they encountered this model of organized higher learning. They brought the concept back with them, leading directly to the establishment of the first European universities in Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. The very structure of a curriculum, the lecture system, the awarding of degrees like the licentia docendi or license to teach, and the idea of a faculty of different subjects all have their roots in the madrasa and Bimaristan system. This was the Abbasid Golden Age's most profound gift to posterity, not just a collection of brilliant ideas, but the very blueprint for how a society can cultivate, preserve, and advance knowledge generation after generation, ensuring that the light of discovery would never be extinguished. While the quadrant provided a reliable method for measuring altitude, the astronomers of the Abbasid era sought to create a tool that could model the entire cosmos in the palm of one's hand. This ambition led to the development of the spherical astrolabe, a breathtakingly complex instrument that represented a massive leap beyond its more common flat cousin. Imagine holding a miniature universe, a hollow bronze sphere etched with the constellations and celestial circles, rotating on an axis within a ring representing the horizon. This was not merely a navigational aid, it was a portable planetarium, a three-dimensional computer designed to solve the most intricate puzzles of the heavens. Where the planispheric astrolabe projected the curved sky onto a two-dimensional plate, the spherical version preserved the true geometry of the celestial sphere, allowing for calculations of unparalleled accuracy and sophistication. The design of this instrument was a masterpiece of craftsmanship and astronomical theory. At its core was the central sphere representing the sky itself. Etched onto its surface were the key circles of the celestial sphere, the celestial equator, the ecliptic path of the Sun, and the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. The stars of the major constellations were marked as points of light. This sphere was mounted on an axis that passed through the celestial poles, allowing it to rotate just as the real sky appears to rotate around the Earth. This entire assembly was then cradled within a vertical meridian ring, which itself was suspended within a larger horizon ring. A sighting device, or alidade, was often attached to the meridian ring, enabling the user to measure the altitude of celestial bodies to calibrate the model. Aligning this intricate device for a specific time and location was a task that required deep knowledge, but once set, it became a dynamic map of the heavens. The true power of the spherical astrolabe lay in its ability to visualize and solve problems that were abstract and difficult on a flat surface. One of its primary uses was for precise timekeeping, especially during the night, or for determining the exact times of prayer that were not directly observable. An astronomer could rotate the sphere to match the current positions of known stars. By reading the angle of the sphere relative to the horizon ring, they could then calculate the precise solar time, even hours after sunset. This was far more accurate than using a single star's altitude, as the spherical model accounted for the complex, interdependent movements of the entire celestial vault. It could also be used to find the direction of Mecca, the Qibla, for any location on Earth by calculating the great circle route across the celestial sphere, a problem of spherical trigonometry that the instrument solved geometrically. Perhaps its most advanced application was in calculating planetary positions. While the fixed stars were etched onto the sphere, a skilled astronomer could use the instrument's calibrated rings to plot the location of a planet against the backdrop of the zodiac. By incorporating planetary tables like the famous Zij al-Sindhine developed in the House of Wisdom, the user could determine a planet's longitude and latitude, predict its retrograde motion, and forecast conjunctions and eclipses. This transformed astronomy from passive observation into active prediction. The spherical astrolabe made the abstract mathematics of Ptolemy's Almagest tangible, allowing scholars to physically manipulate a model of the universe and see the consequences of celestial mechanics unfold before their eyes. It was, in essence, an analog computer for the cosmos. The creation and use of such a device speak volumes about the intellectual climate of the time. It was an instrument for specialists, for astronomers who were pushing the boundaries of knowledge rather than for sailors or surveyors who needed quick, practical answers. Its complexity required a profound understanding of both the theory of the heavens and the geometry needed to build and operate it. surviving examples are exceedingly rare, a testament to the incredible skill required to fabricate them. The spherical astrolabe represents the pinnacle of a certain kind of scientific thinking, the desire not just to use tools, but to create a perfect physical representation of a theoretical model. It stands as a silent witness to an age when humanity's grasp of the universe was deepening rapidly, fueled by tools that bridged the gap between mathematical abstraction and the wondrous reality of the night sky. Yet even the complex orchestras and peacock fountains were not the limits of Al-Jazari's ambition to mechanize the arts. He envisioned a machine capable of a far more intimate and nuanced performance, an automatic flute player. This was an invention that sought not just to produce sound, but to replicate the very act of musical performance itself, mimicking the subtle interplay of human breath and dexterous finger work. The result was a machine that didn't simply play notes. It played an instrument, blurring the line between a clever noisemaker and an artificial musician in a way that remains astonishing today. The core challenge was profound. A flute produces sound when a stream of air is directed across a sharp edge or lip, causing the air column inside the tube to vibrate. A human flautist controls two things: the breath pressure and speed to create a steady stream of air, and the precise covering and uncovering of finger holes to change the length of the vibrating air column, thus producing different notes. Al-Jazari's genius was in engineering separate, coordinated systems to automate both of these actions. For the breath, he turned to hydropower. He designed a water-driven bellows system. As a water wheel turned, it would operate a piston or a lever that compressed a pair of bellows, forcing a steady and controllable stream of air through a pipe that acted as the flute's mouthpiece. This was the machine's lungs, providing a consistent and unwavering supply of breath that a human player might struggle to maintain. Controlling the melody, however, required a different kind of ingenuity. This is where his signature programmable cylinder came into play, a rotating drum studded with an intricate pattern of strategically placed pins served as the machine's musical memory. But instead of triggering hammers on drums or valves on organ pipes, these pins were designed to control the fingering. The pins on the cylinder were linked via a sophisticated array of levers and strings to a set of mechanical fingers that rested over the holes of the flute. As the cylinder turned at a steady pace, each pin would engage its lever at a precise moment, causing a specific mechanical finger to lift from or press down onto its corresponding hole on the flute's body. The pattern of these pins was the song. By changing their arrangement, the entire melody could be reprogrammed, allowing the machine to play different tunes. The true marvel of this invention was the synchronization of these two systems. The water wheel provided the power for both the bellows and the rotation of the programmable cylinder, ensuring that the flow of air and the movement of the fingers were perfectly timed. A pin lifting a finger to open a hole had to coincide exactly with the moment the air was flowing to produce a clear note. This required a deep understanding of mechanical timing and feedback that was far ahead of its era. It wasn't enough for the machine to move. Its movements had to be harmonized with the fluid dynamics of the air it produced, creating a seamless simulation of a living musician. Beyond its technical brilliance, the automatic flute player represents a fascinating philosophical step. While his earlier musical automata created sound through percussion or organ pipes, this machine directly usurped a human skill. It didn't just make music, it played a wind instrument, an act that involves breath, embouchure, and finger coordination, skills long considered uniquely human. In creating this automaton, Al-Jazari was probing the nature of artistry itself, asking whether the physical actions of a performer could be decomposed into mechanical components and reliably recreated. This machine stands as a puzzling and profound artifact from the Abbasid Golden Age, not merely for its complexity, but for its ambition to capture the essence of human expression within the turning gears and flowing water of an engineered marvel. While the mechanical flute player mimicked the breath of a musician, Al-Jazari scaled this principle up to create an instrument of immense power and grandeur, the water-powered organ. This was not a delicate automaton for a small chamber, but a sonic marvel designed to fill vast courtyards and throne rooms with a continuous, unwavering wall of sound. It solved a fundamental problem that had plagued organ builders since the time of the ancient Greeks: how to maintain a steady and powerful supply of air to the pipes. Earlier Greek and Roman organs, known as hydraules, used a complex system where a hand pump forced air into a chamber partially submerged in water. The water pressure helped stabilize the air pressure, but it still required one or more assistants to work the pumps constantly, leading to fluctuations in pressure and volume. Al-Jazari's genius was to replace human muscle with the relentless, predictable force of flowing water, creating the first organ that could, in theory, play forever without tiring. The heart of his invention was a revolutionary air regulation system centered on a floating tank. Imagine a large, sealed container partially filled with air, floating upside down in a larger vessel of water, much like an inverted bucket trapped beneath the surface. A steady stream of water was channeled into this outer vessel. As the water level rose, it compressed the air inside the floating tank, increasing its pressure. This pressurized air was then fed through a pipe to the wind chest that supplied the organ's pipes. The true brilliance was in the regulator. Al-Jazari included an overflow mechanism, ensuring the water in the outer vessel could never rise above a certain level. This meant the air pressure inside the tank remained perfectly constant, regardless of how long the water flowed. It was an automatic, self-regulating compressor, providing a stability of tone and power that human-powered pumps could never achieve. This constant air supply was then directed to a set of pipes, but the music itself was still under programmable control, showcasing Al-Jazari's love for combining raw power with intricate detail. The instrument likely employed a variation of his peg drum technology, a rotating cylinder turned by the same water source that powered the air compressor would have pins arranged in a specific melodic pattern. As the drum turned, these pins would trip levers that opened and closed the valves controlling individual pipes. This meant the organ could play a repeating, pre-programmed tune with the same relentless consistency as its air supply. The sound produced would have been monumental, a deep, resonant drone capable of underlying court ceremonies, punctuated by melodic sequences that echoed through palace halls with an otherworldly, mechanical precision. The context for such an instrument was the grand court celebration where power was expressed through spectacle. In an age before amplification, the ability to generate such a powerful and continuous sound was a direct manifestation of a ruler's authority and technological sophistication. The water-powered organ was more than a musical instrument, it was an acoustic landmark. Its deep tones would have signaled the beginning of a royal audience, accompanied a procession, or provided a dramatic backdrop for announcements, drowning out all other noise and commanding absolute attention. It transformed music from an intimate performance into an environmental experience, shaping the very atmosphere of the court and immersing guests in a soundscape that was literally engineered by the caliph's patronage. When compared to its ancient predecessors, the leap in engineering is stark. The Greek hydraules was an impressive invention, but it was fundamentally a manual instrument tied to the stamina of its operators. Al-Jazari's organ was automated. It represented a shift from human-powered tools to machine-driven systems, a conceptual bridge to the industrial automation of later centuries. By harnessing hydropower not just for motion but for the precise control of a fluid like air, he demonstrated an understanding of pneumatics that was centuries ahead of its time. This organ stands as a testament to a culture that saw no boundary between the artist and the engineer, where the goal of creating awe-inspiring beauty was a challenge worthy of the most advanced technological solutions ever devised. This concept of a dedicated, organized medical institution finds its most complete expression in the Bimaristan, a Persian term meaning place of the sick. But to call it merely a hospital is to undersell its revolutionary nature. The Bimaristan was a cornerstone of Abbasid social welfare, a place where medical care was considered a right, not a privilege. Funded by charitable endowments known as waqfs, these institutions provided treatment completely free of charge to anyone who needed it, regardless of their religion, gender, or social status. This was a radical departure from anything that had come before. In the ancient world, healing temples like those of Asclepius in Greece were more concerned with ritual and supplication, while in much of contemporary Europe, care was often the haphazard responsibility of monastic infirmaries. The Bimaristan was something entirely new, a secular, state-sponsored center for evidence-based medicine designed from the ground up to heal on a massive scale. The organization within these institutions was astonishingly modern. Instead of a single hall for all ailments, Bimaristans were divided into specialized wards, each dedicated to a specific type of disease. There were separate sections for fevers, digestive illnesses, surgical cases, and even for eye diseases and mental health conditions. This systematic segregation was a monumental leap in infection control and allowed physicians to develop deep expertise in their chosen fields. The most famous of these, the Al-Jazari Hospital in 10th century Baghdad, was a sprawling complex with a staff of 24 physicians, including specialists in every branch of medicine known at the time. It featured a large lecture hall for teaching, an extensive library filled with medical texts, and its own dedicated pharmacy, ensuring that treatments prescribed by the doctors could be prepared on site with precision and consistency. The role of the chief physician, or Sa'ir, extended far beyond diagnosis. He was the administrator, the head teacher, and the head of clinical practice. His daily rounds were a form of live education. Accompanied by a retinue of students and junior doctors, he would move from bed to bed, examining patients, discussing symptoms, and debating possible diagnoses and treatments in front of his trainees. This was the birth of the clinical teaching model, the very same method used in medical schools today. Students didn't just read about diseases in books, they saw them, touched them, and learned to distinguish between them under the guidance of an experienced master. After the rounds, the chief physician would often deliver formal lectures in the hospital's hall, dissecting the day's cases and connecting practical observations to the theoretical principles found in the works of Galen, Hippocrates, and the latest Islamic scholars. This integrated system created a self-perpetuating cycle of medical advancement. The library provided the theoretical foundation, the wards offered unlimited practical experience, and the pharmacy ensured that treatments were standardized and effective. A student could read about a compound medicine in Al-Kindi's formulary, watch it being prepared by the hospital's pharmacist, and then observe its effects on a patient under the care of a senior physician. This constant feedback loop between theory and practice accelerated the pace of medical learning and refinement. It also established rigorous standards of care. Physicians were examined and licensed before they could practice, and their work was subject to peer review. The Bimaristan was not just a place of healing, it was the world's first true medical university, a factory for producing competent, empirically trained doctors, and a living laboratory for the continuous improvement of medicine itself. This comprehensive, systematic approach to healthcare, conceived over 1,000 years ago, laid the administrative, educational, and ethical groundwork for every modern hospital that followed. Beyond the grand clocks and musical automata, Al-Jazari's genius also expressed itself in a more intimate and mischievous form, designed not for imperial spectacle but for the laughter and surprise of a royal banquet. He created a series of what we might call trick vessels, everyday objects like pitchers and cups engineered with hidden hydraulic mechanisms that turn the simple act of pouring a drink into a playful test of wit. These were conversation pieces, elegant pranks crafted from brass and glass that revealed a wonderfully playful side to Abbasid engineering, where intellect was applied to the art of entertainment with dazzling creativity. One of his most clever inventions was the puzzle pitcher, a vessel that defied normal use. To a guest, it appeared to be a beautifully decorated ewer, no different from any other on the table. However, if one tried to pour from it in the conventional way, tilting it from the spout, nothing would happen. The pitcher would seem to be empty or broken, much to the user's confusion. The secret lay in a hidden internal pipe and a small, strategically placed air hole. To make the pitcher work, the user had to cover this air hole with their thumb while tilting it. By doing so, they created a partial vacuum inside, allowing atmospheric pressure to force the liquid up through the internal pipe and out of the spout. This was a direct, hands-on demonstration of a fundamental principle of pneumatics, a practical lesson in physics disguised as a party trick. The amusement came from watching uninitiated guests fumble with the pitcher, while those in the know could demonstrate their understanding with a simple, secret gesture. Another ingenious device was the self-emptying cup, a lesson in moderation served in a chalice. This cup could be filled with drink like any other, but only up to a specific, unmarked level. If a guest, perhaps feeling greedy, poured beyond this point, they would trigger a sudden and complete disaster. The cup would secretly activate a siphon mechanism. A hidden internal chamber would fill to a critical level, at which point the principle of communicating vessels would take over. The liquid would begin to flow through a concealed internal tube that looped up and then down, emptying the entire contents of the cup through a small hole in its base all over the unfortunate drinker's lap. The mechanism was entirely automatic, relying on gravity and fluid dynamics to punish excess with a humorous, if embarrassing, deluge. The true brilliance of these trick vessels lies in their purpose. They were more than simple jokes, they were instruments of sophisticated social interaction. At a royal banquet where etiquette and cleverness were highly prized, these objects served as icebreakers and tests of intelligence. They created a shared experience, a moment of collective suspense and then laughter that bonded the guests. Furthermore, they carried a subtle moral dimension. The self-emptying cup, in particular, acted as a physical parable against greed, rewarding moderation and punishing gluttony in the most immediate way possible. They transformed a scientific principle into a social commentary, demonstrating that engineering could be a medium for wit and wisdom just as effectively as it was for power and precision. In these playful creations, we see that the ultimate goal of Abbasid technology was not just to solve practical problems, but to enhance the human experience in all its facets, including the simple, profound joy of shared amusement. Yet, for all their sophistication, the water clocks that powered so many of these wonders had an inherent vulnerability. They were slaves to their environment. In the heat of a Baghdad summer, water would evaporate more quickly, potentially speeding up the clock's mechanism. In a cold snap, the water could freeze entirely, bringing the great cosmic engines of Al-Jazari to a grinding halt. It was this fundamental weakness that spurred Abbasid engineers to explore a more robust and universal power source, one that would tick with unwavering consistency regardless of the season: gravity. While the monumental water clocks capture our imagination, there is compelling evidence that these same brilliant minds were quietly pioneering the technology that would define timekeeping for the next millennium: the weight-driven clock. The conceptual leap from water power to weight power is profound. Instead of relying on the unreliable flow of a liquid, a weight-driven mechanism harnesses the constant, predictable force of a heavy object falling. A weight, typically a bag of sand or a metal mass, is suspended by a rope wound around a drum. As gravity pulls the weight downward, it turns the drum. This rotation is the clock's power source. The critical challenge, however, is not generating the power but regulating it. An unchecked weight will simply plummet to the ground in seconds. The true genius of the clockmaker lies in inventing a device that can harness this raw power and release it in tiny, precisely measured increments, transforming a violent fall into the stately, regular tick-tock of a timepiece. This regulating device is the escapement, and it is the very heart of a mechanical clock. While definitive, complete weight-driven clocks from the Abbasid era have not survived, scholars point to tantalizing clues in technical manuscripts. The most significant evidence comes from the astronomical treatises of scholars like Al-Biruni in the 11th century. These texts describe intricate astronomical instruments that required a regulated, intermittent motion to turn star charts or demonstrate planetary movements. The language used suggests the use of a mechanism that would escape or release a gear tooth by tooth at a controlled rate. This is the fundamental principle of the escapement, a swinging or rotating component that alternately locks and releases the gear train powered by the falling weight, allowing it to advance in a series of small, equal steps. Imagine a simple prototype, a vertical rod with a horizontal crossbar at the top, known as a verge. On this verge are two small pallets that engage the teeth of a crown-shaped wheel, which is being driven by the weight. As the crown wheel tries to turn, one of its teeth pushes against a pallet, causing the verge to rock back and forth. With each rock, the tooth escapes and the next tooth is caught by the opposite pallet. The speed of this rocking motion is controlled by a swinging bar attached to the verge called a foliot. By adjusting weights on the foliot, the maker can slow down or speed up the oscillation, and thus the rate at which the weight descends. This combination of a weight, a gear train, and a verge and foliot escapement is the complete mechanical clock in its embryonic form. The advantages of this system over water power were immense. A weight-driven mechanism is impervious to temperature fluctuations. It works with the same regularity in the desert as it does in the mountains. It requires no constant water supply or complex systems of tanks and floats, making it simpler to maintain and more portable. This reliability would have been particularly valuable for timekeeping tied to religious observance, where the precise timing of prayers was a matter of deep spiritual significance. A clock that could be trusted day in and day out, summer and winter, was a tool of both practical and profound importance. The puzzling question, then, is why this technology did not immediately replace the water clock in the Islamic world. The answer likely lies in a combination of cultural preference and specific need. The great water clocks of Al-Jazari were not merely timekeepers, they were grand public spectacles where the flow of water itself was part of the theatrical performance. The automation, the musical chimes, the moving figures, all were perfectly suited to hydraulic power. The weight-driven mechanism, by contrast, was more utilitarian, better for accuracy than for show. It may have been developed and used in specialized scientific contexts, such as in observatories for driving astrolabes or other instruments where unwavering precision was paramount, while the more dramatic water clocks remained the centerpieces of public squares and palaces. This technological fork in the road is a fascinating historical what-if. The essential components of the mechanical clock, the weight drive and the escapement, were clearly within the grasp of Abbasid engineers. Yet it was in Europe, several centuries later, that these ideas were fully integrated and miniaturized to create the towering public clocks that came to define medieval town squares. The Abbasid experiments with weight-driven mechanisms represent a path not fully taken, a brilliant glimpse of a future technology that was conceptually understood but perhaps not yet seen as the ultimate solution for their specific cultural and aesthetic goals. It stands as a powerful reminder that innovation is not always a straight line, and that even the most advanced civilizations can possess a technology without feeling the need to make it the centerpiece of their world, leaving it instead as a tantalizing clue of their visionary genius for future generations to uncover. For a patient in 10th century Al-Andalus, the prospect of surgery was a terrifying ordeal, not just because of the procedure itself, but because of the almost certain agony and the high risk of a horrific infection from wounds that could not be properly closed. It was into this landscape of suffering that Al-Jazari brought two innovations that transformed surgery from a brutal last resort into a more viable, humane practice. His work on sutures and anesthesia addressed the twin horrors of the operating theater, unbearable pain and the perilous aftermath of an open wound. While his specialized instruments were revolutionary, it was these softer, almost biological technologies that perhaps had the most profound impact on patient survival and comfort, moving the surgeon's role from that of a swift carver to that of a meticulous healer. The problem of closing a wound, especially inside the body, was a monumental challenge. Using materials like silk or linen thread for external stitches was common, but if a wound was deep or involved internal organs, these sutures posed a grave danger. Left inside the body, non-dissolvable threads could become a focal point for infection, acting as a permanent foreign body that the patient's system would constantly fight, often leading to the formation of abscesses or the rupture of the stitch itself. Al-Jazari's brilliant solution was to pioneer the use of catgut for internal sutures. This material, made from the purified intestines of sheep or other animals, had a miraculous property: it was biodegradable. The body's natural enzymes would gradually break down the catgut over a period of days or weeks, just long enough for the tissues to heal together strongly, after which the suture would simply dissolve and be absorbed, leaving no dangerous remnant behind. This was a leap in biomedical understanding that feels remarkably modern. Al-Jazari didn't just find a convenient material, he understood the principle of biocompatibility. He provided detailed instructions on how to prepare the catgut, ensuring it was clean and pliable, and he described precisely how to use it to ligate blood vessels to control bleeding during amputations or to sew together layers of muscle and tissue after abdominal surgery. This practice was a critical factor in reducing post-operative infections and enabling patients to recover from procedures that were previously almost always fatal. The concept of a material that would perform its function and then safely disappear within the body is a cornerstone of modern surgery, and it finds one of its earliest clear advocates in the pages of Al-Jazari's Al-Tasrif, a testament to his profound insight into the body's healing processes. But even the most perfect suture is of little use if the patient is thrashing in agony, making delicate internal work impossible. This is where Al-Jazari's second major contribution comes into play: the development of a practical and sophisticated inhalant anesthetic. While herbal sedatives had been used for millennia, his method was notable for its precision and reliability. His anesthetic sponge was a carefully crafted tool. He described taking a sea sponge and saturating it with a specific mixture of narcotic substances. The recipe could include opium poppy, mandrake root, and henbane leaves, all plants known for their potent pain-killing and sedative properties. This saturated sponge would then be dried and stored, ready for use when needed. The administration of the anesthetic was a carefully controlled procedure. When a surgery was required, the dried sponge would be moistened and placed under the patient's nose, or sometimes over their entire face, allowing them to inhale the vapors. Al-Jazari gave clear instructions on the timing, noting that the patient should be allowed to breathe the fumes until they fell into a deep sleep, at which point the surgery could begin. He even described the signs of the correct level of anesthesia, such as the loss of sensation to pinpricks. This system allowed for surgeries to be performed with a degree of calm and precision that was previously unimaginable. Complex procedures like the removal of bladder stones, the excision of large tumors, or the repair of hernias could be undertaken while the patient was unconscious, eliminating the trauma of excruciating pain and allowing the surgeon to work methodically. The synergy between these two innovations cannot be overstated. Effective anesthesia made longer, more complex internal surgeries feasible because the patient could be kept still and insensate. And the use of dissolvable catgut sutures ensured that these internal incisions could be closed safely, dramatically improving the chances of a successful recovery. Together, they formed a complete system for invasive medicine. Al-Jazari was not merely compiling ancient knowledge, he was synthesizing it into a new, more advanced practice. His work on anesthesia, in particular, demonstrates an early understanding of dosage and controlled administration, moving beyond the realm of simple herbalism into the science of pharmacology. He recognized that the goal was not just to dull pain, but to induce a specific, manageable state of unconsciousness that could be leveraged for the patient's ultimate benefit. In an age where the very concept of painless surgery seemed like a divine miracle, Al-Jazari used empirical observation and systematic preparation to make it a medical reality, saving countless lives from both the shock of the knife and the slow, septic death that so often followed. But while Al-Kindi's pharmacopoeia provided the intellectual framework for precise medicine, this knowledge needed a physical home, a place where theory could be transformed into tangible remedies for the public. This need gave rise to one of the most impactful social innovations of the era, the world's first state-licensed and privately owned pharmacies. In the 9th century, under the watchful eye of the Abbasid Caliphate, the city of Baghdad saw the establishment of these regulated dispensaries known as saydala. This was a revolutionary departure from the past. Before this, the roles of diagnosing an illness and preparing its treatment were often blurred, with physicians themselves mixing their own remedies, a practice that could lead to inconsistency and error. The creation of the saydala formally and legally separated the role of the physician, the tabib, from that of the pharmacist, the saydalani, establishing two distinct, specialized professions dedicated to different parts of the healing process. The environment of a saydala was designed to inspire confidence and ensure quality. Unlike a simple market stall, these were dedicated storefronts, often located in prominent commercial districts. Inside, a customer would find an array of jars and containers made of glass, ceramic, or metal, meticulously labeled and arranged on shelves. The air would be thick with the aromatic scent of herbs, spices, and resins. The saydalani, a licensed professional, would work at a dedicated counter, equipped with scales for precise weighing, mortars and pestles for grinding ingredients, and distillation apparatus for creating essential oils and purified solvents. This was a laboratory and a retail space combined, a visible testament to the fact that medicine preparation was now a scientific craft, conducted in the open with standardized tools and procedures. The licensing process for these pharmacists was rigorous and overseen by a government official known as the mutazib, a sort of inspector general of public morals and markets. The mutazib was responsible for ensuring fair trade practices, but his role extended deeply into public health. He and his deputies would conduct regular inspections of the saydalas, checking the quality of the raw ingredients, verifying the accuracy of the scales, and ensuring that the pharmacists were adhering to the standardized recipes found in official formularies like Al-Kindi's Acrobatin. A pharmacist found to be using adulterated substances, cheating on weights, or preparing medicines incorrectly could face severe penalties, including fines, public censure, or even the revocation of their license to practice. This system of state oversight was groundbreaking, creating a layer of consumer protection and ensuring a remarkably consistent standard of care across the vast empire. This professional separation had profound benefits for patient safety. A physician could now focus entirely on the art of diagnosis, examining the patient, assessing their symptoms, and determining the correct ailment. Once diagnosed, they would write a prescription, a detailed instruction for the pharmacist. The saydalani, in turn, was a master of materia medica. Their expertise lay not in diagnosis, but in the intricate knowledge of hundreds of medicinal substances, their sources, their properties, their interactions, and the precise methods for combining them into effective compounds. This specialization meant that the person preparing a complex medicine was an expert in that specific task, greatly reducing the risk of error. It also helped prevent conflicts of interest, as the physician had no financial incentive to prescribe more medicine than was necessary. The impact of this system rippled outward, fostering both economic growth and scientific advancement. The demand for high-quality, ethically sourced ingredients created specialized markets for spices, herbs, and minerals, stimulating trade across continents. It also accelerated the cross-pollination of medical knowledge. A Saydalani in Baghdad might receive a prescription from a physician trained in the Persian tradition, requiring them to prepare a remedy described in a Greek text that had been translated into Arabic using ingredients imported from India. This daily practice of collaboration forced a constant comparison and refinement of medical ideas, contributing to a dynamic and evolving pharmacological science. The licensed pharmacy was more than a shop. It was a node in a global network of knowledge and commerce, a tangible symbol of a civilization that had decided to organize healing into a rational, reliable, and professionally accountable system, a legacy that continues to shape how we receive medicine to this very day. Now, let's pull back the curtain on a component so fundamental to our modern world that its invention marks a true turning point in human history. While Al-Jazari's automata captivate us with their theatrical brilliance, perhaps his most enduring and globally significant contribution lies in the elegant simplicity of the crank-connecting rod system. This was not a device for entertainment, but a core piece of engineering genius that unlocked a new way to harness power, a principle that would one day drive the entire industrial revolution and literally propel us into the modern age. In his water-raising machines, Al-Jazari perfected a mechanism that is, at its heart, identical to the one that powers the pistons in a car engine today. It's a brilliant solution to one of mechanical engineering's most basic problems: how to transform one type of motion into another. To understand its revolutionary nature, picture the problem it solved. Many natural power sources, like a flowing river turning a water wheel, produce a smooth, continuous rotary motion, a spinning axle. But many essential tasks, like pumping water or sawing wood, require a reciprocating or back-and-forth linear motion. Before the widespread use of the crank-connecting rod, converting that rotary power was clumsy and inefficient, often involving complex arrangements of gears, cams, or levers that could only manage short, limited strokes. Al-Jazari's system elegantly bridged this gap. The setup is deceptively simple. A rotating wheel has an off-center peg attached to it. This is the crank. As the wheel spins, this peg moves in a continuous circle. Attached to this peg is a rigid rod, the connecting rod. The other end of this rod is linked to whatever needs to be moved back and forth, like the piston of a pump. The magic happens in the motion. As the crank pin travels around its circular path, it pulls and pushes the end of the connecting rod. This forces the entire rod to pivot, and because its other end is constrained to move in a straight line, the circular motion of the crank is seamlessly converted into a perfect, robust back-and-forth linear motion. The upstroke of the pump is powered by the crank pulling the rod up, and the downstroke is powered by it pushing the rod down. This creates a continuous, powerful, and highly efficient transfer of energy. It's a kinematic dance where rotation begets reciprocation, a concept that seems obvious to us now but was a dazzling leap of insight at the time. Al-Jazari's practical application of this principle was in his sophisticated water-raising devices, which were critical for irrigation and urban water supply in the arid Abbasid lands. In one design, a water wheel turned by an animal walking in a circle or by the flow of a stream would rotate a central axle. Mounted on this axle was a crank. The crank was connected by a rod to a long, pivoting beam which worked like a seesaw. As the axle turned, the crank would drive the beam up and down. At the other end of this beam, another rod would operate a pump, tirelessly lifting water from a lower canal to a higher aqueduct. This system could move large volumes of water with minimal human effort, directly contributing to agricultural productivity and the health of growing cities. The profound significance of this invention is best understood by looking at what came after. This very same crank connecting rod assembly is the absolute core of the steam engine and the internal combustion engine. In your car engine, the explosion of fuel in a cylinder forces a piston to shoot downward in a straight line. That's the linear motion. The piston is attached to a connecting rod, which is itself connected to the crankshaft. The linear force of the piston is transferred through the rod to the crank, which converts it into the rotary motion that turns your car's wheels. Al-Jazari's device simply worked in reverse, taking rotary motion and making it linear, but the fundamental mechanical relationship is identical. It is the indispensable link that allows us to convert between these two basic states of motion. What makes this so puzzling is the timeline. While simple cranks had been used sporadically in the Roman world, often for small tools like sharpening stones, they were not combined with a connecting rod to create a robust, powerful system for heavy machinery. Al-Jazari not only combined them but documented their use in practical, large-scale applications. Yet, after the Abbasid Golden Age, this technology seems to have faded from widespread use in the region. It would take nearly 300 years for the crank connecting rod to reappear in European machinery, in devices like the mechanical saws depicted in the 14th century sketchbooks of Villard de Honnecourt. Its independent rediscovery in the West became a cornerstone of the machines that would power the Industrial Revolution. The story of the crank connecting rod is thus a testament to a universal truth of engineering, that the most powerful inventions are often the simplest ideas, and their impact can echo for centuries, waiting for the right moment to change the world all over again. But perhaps the most iconic and widely used instrument of the entire era, a true symbol of Islamic scientific prowess, was the planispheric astrolabe. More than a simple tool, it was a portable universe, an analog computer of breathtaking elegance that could fit in the palm of your hand. Imagine holding a complex, multi-layered brass disc, intricately engraved with a web of curves, circles, and figures. To the uninitiated, it might look like a beautiful piece of art, but to a scholar, a navigator, or an astronomer, it was a powerful device capable of solving dozens of practical problems related to time, the cosmos, and one's place in the world. Its very design was a philosophical statement, a physical representation of the belief that the heavens operated according to predictable, mathematical laws that humanity could not only understand but also replicate in metal. The genius of the astrolabe lay in its layered construction, with each component serving a specific function. The main body, called the mater or mother, was a thick, hollow disc with a raised rim. Inside this disc rested a set of interchangeable flat plates, each one engraved for a specific latitude. These plates were the heart of the local map, showing a grid of lines representing the local horizon, the zenith and altitude circles. Resting on top of the plates was the most beautiful part, the retere, a pierced and fretted disc that acted as a star chart. Its delicate pointers represented the positions of the brightest fixed stars, and an off-center circle depicted the ecliptic path of the sun through the zodiac. The entire retere could rotate over the plates, mimicking the daily rotation of the sky. Finally, pivoting on the central pin that held everything together was the alidade, a straight rule with sighting vanes on each end. This was the instrument's input device, used for taking measurements directly from the sky itself. Using the astrolabe was a two-step process of observation and calculation. First, you would go outside and take a measurement. Holding the instrument by a ring at the top, you would suspend it so it hung vertically. Then you would sight along the alidade towards a specific star or the sun. By rotating the alidade until a beam of light passed through both sighting holes, you could read the star's altitude in degrees off the scale engraved on the back of the mater. With this single piece of data, you could go back inside and use the astrolabe as a computer. You would rotate the retere until the pointer for the star you observed aligned with the correct altitude circle on the plate for your city. Once set, the entire instrument became a dynamic model of the sky at that exact moment. The number of problems this simple setup could solve was staggering. The most common use was for timekeeping. Once the reté was set, you could read the time by noting where the sun's position on the ecliptic circle intersected with the hour lines on the plate. This worked equally well day or night. At night, you could use a known star instead of the sun. For Islamic societies, this was essential for determining the 5 daily prayer times, which are defined by the sun's position. The astrolabe could calculate the length of daylight, find the direction of Mecca, or predict the time of sunrise and sunset for any day of the year. For travelers, it was an indispensable navigational aid. By measuring the altitude of the sun at its highest point, a traveler could determine their latitude, allowing them to find their way across featureless deserts or seas. It was, in effect, a handheld observatory and a slide rule combined. The planispheric astrolabe's brilliance was its elegant solution to a complex geometric problem: how to represent the 3-dimensional dome of the sky on a 2-dimensional surface. It achieved this through a mathematical technique called stereographic projection, which flawlessly translates circles on a sphere into circles on a plane. This meant that the intricate movements of the celestial sphere were preserved with perfect accuracy on the flat plates of the astrolabe. This was not a crude approximation, it was a precise mathematical model. The widespread use and continuous refinement of the astrolabe across the Islamic world for centuries is a powerful testament to its utility and the deep understanding of spherical astronomy possessed by the scholars who designed and used it. It was a tool that perfectly embodied the spirit of the Golden Age, uniting abstract mathematical theory with the most practical needs of daily life, from knowing when to pray to finding one's way home under the stars. But while the mechanical genius of Al-Jazari and the astronomical precision of the astrolabe represent incredible heights of innovation, one of the most transformative inventions of the Abbasid Golden Age was not a complex device at all, but a simple, portable, and durable material: paper. The story of how paper arrived in the Islamic world is a dramatic one, born from an unexpected consequence of war. In the year 751, Abbasid forces clashed with a Tang dynasty army at the Battle of Talas, near the border of modern-day Kazakhstan. The conflict itself was significant, but its most lasting impact was an unintended technological transfer. Among the Chinese prisoners captured by the Abbasids were skilled artisans who possessed a closely guarded secret: the art of papermaking. Recognizing the immense value of this knowledge, their Abbasid captors did not imprison them as mere laborers. Instead, they offered them a chance to establish a new industry, transplanting a revolutionary technology from the East to the heart of their own empire. The Chinese method was a marvel of practical chemistry. It began with humble raw materials, primarily rags made from linen or hemp and the fibrous bark of the mulberry tree. These were soaked in water and left to rot slightly, breaking down the tough fibers. They were then pounded into a pulpy mass using large hammers, often powered by a water mill. This pulp was mixed with water in a large vat to create a slurry. A craftsman would then dip a fine bamboo screen mold into the vat, lifting it out with a thin layer of fibers settled evenly across its surface. After the water drained away, the wet sheet was pressed to remove excess moisture and then left to dry, resulting in a strong, flexible sheet of paper. The Abbasid engineers, with their characteristic drive for improvement, quickly began to innovate upon this basic process. They discovered that using linen rags produced an even higher quality, more durable paper than mulberry bark, and they perfected the use of starch-based sizings to make the paper less absorbent, ideal for the flowing script of Arabic calligraphy. The true breakthrough, however, was not just mastering the craft but industrializing it. The Abbasids established the world's first known paper mills, transforming what was a careful handicraft in China into a large-scale manufacturing operation. These mills were often situated on the banks of rivers, harnessing water power to drive the heavy stamping mills that macerated the rags into pulp. This mechanization allowed for production on a scale previously unimaginable. Suddenly, paper was not a rare luxury imported from a distant land. It was a domestic product that could be manufactured cheaply and in vast quantities. The first paper mill was established in Baghdad around the year 793, and the industry spread rapidly to other major cities like Damascus and Cairo, each becoming famous for its own distinctive varieties of paper. The impact of this abundance of cheap, high-quality writing material cannot be overstated. It directly fueled the intellectual explosion that defines the Golden Age. Before paper, the primary writing surfaces in the region were papyrus and parchment. Papyrus, made from an Egyptian reed, was brittle and could not be folded, while parchment, made from animal skins, was prohibitively expensive and time-consuming to produce. A single book required the skins of an entire herd of sheep. Paper, by contrast, was cheap, durable, foldable, and could be produced from recycled textiles. This democratized knowledge in an unprecedented way. The cost of books plummeted, allowing scholars, students, and even merchants to build personal libraries. Copyists could produce manuscripts faster and more affordably, leading to an explosion in the distribution of texts. This was the essential infrastructure that made an institution like the House of Wisdom possible. The monumental translation movement, which saw thousands of works of Greek, Persian, and Indian science and philosophy translated into Arabic, was a direct beneficiary of the paper revolution. Scribes could work continuously, fueled by an endless supply of affordable material. Scholars could easily make copies of texts to share, annotate, and debate. The very practice of scholarship was transformed. It became easier to write drafts, compile commentaries, and disseminate new ideas across the vast Islamic empire from Spain to Central Asia. The humble paper mill, therefore, stands as one of the most pivotal inventions of the era. It was the physical substrate upon which the entire Golden Age was written, the unsung engine that turned a trickle of knowledge into a flood, proving that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with a grand idea, but with the simple, abundant means to record it. While a mechanical clock driven by weights or water could be marvelously complex, its accuracy ultimately depended on the quality of its construction and its environment. For a traveler in the Abbasid era, however, such a device would have been impractical, if not impossible, to carry on a long journey across the vast and varied landscapes of the empire. For them, the most reliable timekeeper was the sun itself, and the challenge became how to capture its unchanging rhythm in a device that could be carried in a pocket. This need led to a remarkable innovation that transformed a simple scientific principle into a masterpiece of portable precision: the universal sundial. Unlike a fixed sundial cemented into a courtyard wall, which was only accurate for the specific latitude where it was built, this new invention was a mathematician's dream, a sundial that could be calibrated for any location on Earth, making it a truly global timepiece. The fundamental problem that these universal sundials solved was one of geometry. A standard sundial works because the sun's apparent path across the sky changes depending on your latitude. At the equator, the sun passes almost directly overhead, while at the North Pole it skims the horizon. This means the angle at which the sun's shadow is cast by the central gnomon, the pointer on a sundial, is different everywhere. A sundial built for Cairo would give wildly inaccurate readings if taken to Damascus. The genius of the universal design was its adjustable gnomon. Instead of a fixed triangle, the gnomon on these portable devices was a movable arm that could be set to the specific angle corresponding to the user's current latitude. By tilting this arm correctly, the user effectively reoriented the entire dial to match their local celestial conditions. But the true sophistication lay in the dial face itself. To be universal, it couldn't have a single set of hour lines. Instead, Abbasid mathematicians and instrument makers engraved the dial with a complex series of curves and arcs. These lines represented the paths the shadow's tip would follow at different times of the year and for a range of latitudes, some of the most advanced versions, often taking the form of a cylindrical sundial or a navicular divinettis, looked more like a navigational chart than a simple time-telling device. The user would not only set the gnommon's angle but would also align a specific date line with the adjustable parts of the instrument. This double calibration for both location and season allowed the shadow to fall across the correct set of curved hour lines, providing a reading that accounted for the intricate dance of the Earth around the Sun. Creating the mathematical framework for these curves was an immense intellectual achievement. It required a deep understanding of spherical trigonometry, the branch of mathematics that deals with the relationships between the sides and angles of triangles drawn on a sphere. Scholars had to project the three-dimensional geometry of the celestial sphere onto a two-dimensional, portable surface. This was the same kind of thinking that went into the planispheric astrolabe, but applied to the specific problem of telling time. The resulting instruments were, in effect, analog computers dedicated to solving the equation of time for any given point on the planet. Their portability meant that a merchant on the Silk Road, a scholar traveling to a new madrasa, or a pilgrim on the Hajj to Mecca could always ascertain the correct time for prayers or business with a degree of accuracy that was previously reserved for fixed public clocks. The significance of the universal sundial, therefore, extends beyond mere convenience. It is a powerful symbol of the cosmopolitan nature of the Abbasid Golden Age. In an empire that stretched from the edges of China to the Atlantic coast of Spain, where people and ideas moved freely across continents, the ability to carry a piece of home, or rather, a piece of the cosmic order, in your pocket was profoundly important. It represented a world that was both vast and knowable, where human ingenuity could compress the laws of the universe into a beautiful, functional object. This device ensured that no matter how far one traveled, the rhythm of the day, governed by the sun and structured by faith and commerce, remained constant, a silent testament to a civilization that saw itself as connected to the entire world under the same sky. While we have marveled at the tangible inventions, the clocks, the automata, the surgical tools, it is time to turn our attention to what may be the single most important and puzzling contribution of the Abbasid Golden Age, an invention not of brass or paper but of the mind itself. This was the very concept of scientific experimentation, a rigorous methodology that transformed guesswork into knowledge and laid the foundation for the modern world. The architect of this intellectual revolution was Ibn al-Haytham, a towering figure whose work was so profound that he is often credited as the world's first true scientist. Living in the 10th and 11th centuries, he confronted a world where knowledge was often accepted on the authority of ancient giants like Aristotle or Ptolemy. To question their conclusions was akin to questioning the natural order. Ibn al-Haytham dared to do just that, and in doing so, he forged a new path to truth that was based not on who said it, but on what could be proven. His journey began with a radical act of skepticism directed at one of the most established theories of his time, how human vision works. The prevailing theory, dating back to Euclid, was that the eye emitted a kind of visual ray that traveled outward to touch objects, making them visible. Ibn al-Haytham found this idea deeply flawed. If vision worked this way, he reasoned, why would we not be able to see in the dark? Why would looking at a distant star not take an immense amount of time for the ray to travel there and back? He proposed a revolutionary alternative, that light rays, originating from a source like the sun and reflecting off objects, travel in straight lines into the eye. We are not active projectors of sight, but passive receivers of light. This was a complete inversion of the established model, and he knew that to prove it, he needed more than just persuasive argument. He needed undeniable evidence. This is where Ibn al-Haytham's true genius revealed itself. He understood that a claim must be tested under controlled conditions, and his laboratory was the camera obscura, or dark chamber. He would enter a completely blackened room, allowing only a single pinpoint beam of sunlight to enter through a tiny hole in a shutter. On the wall opposite the hole, he observed an astonishing phenomenon. An image of the world outside appeared, perfectly detailed and in color, but upside down and reversed. Previous scholars had noted this curious effect, but Ibn al-Haytham was the first to systematically investigate it as a controlled experiment. He meticulously varied the size of the aperture, demonstrating that a smaller, more precise hole produced a sharper image. He used multiple holes to create multiple images. Through these painstaking trials, he proved that light travels in straight lines from every point on an object, and that the inverted image was the inevitable geometric result of this principle. The camera obscura was not a mere curiosity. It was a laboratory that provided irrefutable visual proof of his theory of vision. This approach formed the core of his new scientific method, which he laid out in his monumental work, The Book of Optics. He argued that the seeker of truth must begin with doubt. One cannot simply trust the writings of past authorities. Every hypothesis must be subjected to rigorous experimentation. The experiment itself must be repeatable so that any other investigator can follow the same steps and verify the results. The conclusions must be based solely on the empirical evidence gathered, not on preconceived notions or desired outcomes. This cycle: observe, form a hypothesis, test through controlled experiment, analyze the data, and draw a conclusion, is the very bedrock of modern science. Ibn al-Haytham was articulating a process that would not become standard in Europe for another 600 years. The impact of this methodological invention is immeasurable. It represented a fundamental shift from a culture of commentary on ancient texts to a culture of active, empirical investigation. It gave scholars a powerful tool to interrogate nature directly. His work on optics, for instance, correctly explained phenomena like refraction, where light bends when passing through different mediums, which laid the groundwork for the eventual development of eyeglasses, telescopes, and microscopes. But more importantly, it established a standard of proof. It created the idea of a scientific community built on verification and skepticism, where knowledge advances not by the weight of authority, but by the strength of evidence. In a world filled with magnificent machines, Ibn al-Haytham's greatest invention was the engine of discovery itself, a reliable process for distinguishing fact from fiction, and for ensuring that our understanding of the world could continually grow and correct itself, generation after generation. From the playful trickery of his puzzle pictures, Al-Jazari's imagination scaled up to create a spectacle of hospitality that transformed an entire royal pool into a stage for mechanical wonder. This was his mechanical wine server, an invention that merged the elegance of a floating vessel with the intricate timing of an automated performance. Picture a decorative boat crafted to resemble a peacock or another royal symbol, gliding silently across the water in a courtyard pool during a lavish banquet. To the guests, it was a beautiful centerpiece, but as it drew near, the boat would reveal its true nature. Figures of musicians and servants arranged on its deck would suddenly spring to life. Mechanical oarsmen would row, a flautist would appear to play, and a central figure would extend its arm, offering a cup of wine to the astonished ruler. This was not just a machine, it was a floating theater of generosity, a testament to a host's power to command even the elements to serve his guests. The mesmerizing performance was powered by a sophisticated system hidden within the boat's hull, a network of mechanisms driven by the very water it floated upon. The primary power source was likely a water wheel mounted on the side of the vessel, its paddles turned by the resistance as the boat was manually pulled along a guide rope across the pool. As this wheel rotated, it turned an axle connected to a series of gears and cams. These components were the hidden conductors of the spectacle. A rotating cam with its carefully shaped lobes would push against levers at precise intervals. One cam might be responsible for the rocking motion of the oarsmen, another for the alternating motion of the musician's arms, and yet another for the graceful extension of the servant's arm presenting the cup. The entire sequence was pre-programmed into the physical shapes of these cams, ensuring that the musical performance and the offering of the drink occurred in a perfectly synchronized ballet of motion. The true challenge and a mark of Al-Jazari's engineering genius was managing the liquid itself. The boat needed to carry and dispense wine without leaking or spilling. The solution involved an internal reservoir, likely a sealed container, with a sophisticated dispensing mechanism. A small pipe would lead from this reservoir to the cup held by the servant figure. The act of serving was controlled by another part of the cam-driven system. At the designated moment in the sequence, a lever would open a valve for a precise duration, allowing a measured amount of wine to flow into the cup. This attention to portion control was crucial, preventing waste and ensuring the serving was a dignified gesture rather than a messy accident. After the cup was offered and the guest partook, the mechanism would reset, the valve would close, and the boat, its duty fulfilled, could continue its journey or be reset for the next performance. In the context of the royal court, this invention was a masterpiece of political theater. It was a powerful symbol of the caliph's wealth, technological sophistication, and boundless generosity. The ability to present a guest with a drink served by an automated floating orchestra was a display of power far more subtle and impressive than mere extravagance. It communicated that the ruler commanded not only armies and treasuries but also the very frontiers of science and art. The mechanical wine server was the pinnacle of interactive entertainment, creating a moment of pure, shared awe that elevated a simple act of hospitality into an unforgettable demonstration of a civilization at its creative and technical peak, where even a drink of water could be transformed into a miracle of engineering. And so we arrive at the 30th and final marvel on our list, an invention that perhaps more than any other encapsulates the breathtaking ambition of Abbasid engineering. A robot designed not for labor or timekeeping, but for the soulful act of creating music. Al-Jazari's lute-playing automaton stands as a pinnacle of his life's work, a machine that dared to replicate one of the most nuanced and deeply human of all arts. Imagine the scene in a 13th century court. As guests recline on cushions, a life-sized figure, intricately crafted to resemble a musician, sits with a lute in its arms. At a signal, its mechanical fingers begin to move, pressing down on the strings of the instrument while another mechanism gently plucks them, producing not just random notes but a recognizable, programmable melody with a steady, rhythmic beat. In an age devoid of recording technology, this would have been a sight bordering on sorcery, the illusion of life breathed into brass and wood, capable of a performance that could, for a moment, fool the ear and captivate the heart. The mechanical challenge of creating such a device was immense, far surpassing that of his water organs or percussion automata. A lute is a complex instrument requiring two distinct, perfectly coordinated actions from the player. The fingers of one hand must dance across the neck, pressing the strings against the frets to change the pitch of the notes, a technique known as stopping. Meanwhile, the fingers of the other hand must strum or pluck the strings to actually produce the sound. Al-Jazari's genius was in decomposing this fluid human skill into two separate, automated systems that worked in flawless harmony. For the strumming hand, he likely employed a rotating wheel or a cam-driven plectrum that would consistently strike the strings, but the true marvel was the fingering hand. This required a level of programmable precision never before attempted. He almost certainly used a variation of his iconic peg drum, a rotating cylinder studded with an intricate pattern of pins. Each pin's position would correspond to a specific note, triggering a lever that forced a mechanical finger down onto a predetermined fret on the lute's neck. The sequence of pins was the song's melody, a physical music box roll carved in brass, defining which notes were played and for how long. What elevates this invention from a mere novelty to a profound puzzle is its pursuit of artificial musicianship. This was not a machine that simply made noise. It was designed to emulate the performance of a skilled artist. The rhythm was governed by the steady, relentless rotation of the water-driven mechanism that turned the peg drum, ensuring a tempo that never wavered. The melody was encoded in the pin pattern, a permanent record of a musical composition that could, in theory, be preserved and replayed indefinitely. Al-Jazari was grappling with the very essence of artistic expression, breaking it down into a series of mechanical actions. He was asking a question that would not be seriously revisited for centuries. Can the soul of music be captured in a system of gears and levers? His lute player suggests that he believed, on some level, that the technical execution of music, its rhythm, melody, and harmony, could be systematized and automated, separating the physical act of performance from the creative spark of the composer. This fascination with replicating life through machinery speaks volumes about the intellectual spirit of the Abbasid Golden Age. The creation of automata was not merely a technical exercise or a quest for practical utility. It was a philosophical pursuit, an exploration of the boundaries between the animate and the inanimate. By building machines that could write, serve drinks, wash hands, and play music, scholars like Al-Jazari were probing the nature of life itself. What are the actions that define a living, conscious being? If a machine can mimic those actions with perfect fidelity, what does that say about the uniqueness of life? These were not questions they would have phrased in modern terms, but the drive to create such lifelike machines reveals a culture deeply engaged with these ideas. The lute-playing robot was the ultimate expression of this desire, not to replace human musicians, but to understand and celebrate their artistry by recreating it through the limitless potential of engineering. It represents a moment in history where science and art converged not in opposition, but in a harmonious duet, a final, resonant chord in the symphony of invention that defined an unparalleled golden age. So we've journeyed through a world that defies simple categorization, a landscape of the mind where the boundary between practical necessity and pure imagination simply melted away. On one hand, we saw the profoundly utilitarian, the crank and connecting rod that would one day power global industry, the surgical sutures that dissolved inside the body, and the precise pharmaceutical scales that brought safety to medicine. These were inventions born from the daily needs of a vast, thriving civilization, solutions that improved health, expanded agriculture, and fueled commerce on an unprecedented scale. Yet, from the very same workshops emerged creations of breathtaking whimsy and spectacle. Robot servants that offered towels, elephant clocks that staged theatrical performances on the hour, and floating musical ensembles that glided across palace pools. This astonishing range from the life-saving needle to the life-imitating automaton is what makes the Abbasid Golden Age so uniquely compelling. It was an era that refused to choose between the useful and the wonderful, understanding that the drive for efficiency and the hunger for wonder are two sides of the same brilliant coin. This incredible burst of creativity did not happen in a vacuum. It was the product of a rare and powerful convergence, a perfect storm of intellectual ambition. First, there were the immense resources of the Abbasid Caliphate, an empire that spanned continents and controlled the trade routes of the known world, funneling wealth into patronage on a scale rarely seen in history. But money alone does not build a house of wisdom. What truly ignited the age was an insatiable, organized curiosity, a societal mandate to seek out knowledge wherever it could be found. Caliphs and scholars actively dispatched emissaries to gather texts from Byzantium, India, and Persia, creating a massive, collaborative project of translation that brought the wisdom of the ancients into a common dialogue. This was the second crucial element: cross-cultural exchange. In Baghdad, a Greek theorem discussed by a Christian translator could inspire a Persian engineer to improve upon a Chinese water clock, all within a single, vibrant intellectual ecosystem. It was this fearless blending of traditions, this conviction that truth had no nationality, that allowed for such monumental leaps. The legacy of these puzzling inventions is a humbling one. Consider that the mechanical principles Al-Jazari perfected in the 1300s, like programmable automation and complex gear trains, would not be widely seen in Europe until the 18th century. The clinical trials and evidence-based medicine pioneered in the Bimaristans set a standard that would take the West hundreds of years to rediscover. These were not incremental improvements. They were visionary leaps that established foundational concepts for the modern world, from the scientific method to the very idea of a university. The achievements of the Abbasid Golden Age force us to reconsider the standard timeline of progress, revealing a long and brilliant chapter of human innovation that was, for a time, the glowing center of the world. As we close this exploration, the question is no longer if these inventions were impressive, but which of them captures your imagination the most. Did the sheer mechanical genius of Al-Jazari's castle clock, a medieval computer that mapped the heavens, leave you in awe? Or was it the profound courage of Abbas ibn Firnas, strapping on wings and leaping into the sky in a daring experiment that prefigured the entire history of flight? Perhaps it was the quiet revolution of the paper mill, the simple technology that made the entire age possible by giving ideas a cheap and durable form. I want to hear from you. Scroll down to the comments and tell me, which of these 30 puzzling inventions from the Abbasid Golden Age did you find the most astonishing and why? Let's continue the conversation and keep the spirit of curiosity